Welcome, curious minds out there, and thank you for tuning into another awesome episode of this wonderful little podcast. Tonight's guest is Jason McLean from Waxahachie, Texas, who happens to be an artist and biblical paranormal researcher. Jason has a passion for not only art and comics, but also the study of archaeology, cryptozoology, as well as astronomy. The reason behind all this is to get a better understanding for the Bible, its teachings, and the one behind its creation. Jason created the Society for the Investigation and Research of the Unexplained. Jason, thank you for being my guest tonight.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Daniel. It's a pleasure to be here and to talk to your wonderful audience.
Awesome. Yeah, we've talked about it a minute ago. You're from Waxahachie. Tell me more about that name.
So technically, I'm actually from DeSoto. I live in Waxahachie now. Essentially, they're all suburbs of Dallas, right? Um, I grew up like where I grew up in DeSoto. The northern border of my little town was Dallas. Like that was it. Like it's my father grew up in Oak Cliff, which is basically Dallas. It's technically its own thing, but not at the same time. Um, so yeah, I mean, I've lived in North Texas pretty much all my life. There was a few years I was out in East Texas, but yeah, just living life, seeing a living pterosaur, and set me on this weird quest. I mean, here we are. So that's I draw some things, I see some things. That's I'm really kind of boring, all things considered.
Seen a living pterosaur. Well, that's interesting. I think we have to talk about that. Um,
It's
actually,
a that's a fair enough place to start if you want. Yeah.
yeah, actually, I do believe that these kind of animals still exist. To be honest, man, maybe before we start, I still want to know more about your background at first. So please,
Sure.
if it,
Um, so yeah, my father was a mechanic, right, Vietnam vet, and he came back to, you know, South Dallas, where I was raised. And it was, I'm a child of the 80s, so we spent a lot more time outside than a lot of people. But my father, well, again, mechanic and an artist in his own right, but he focused on being a mechanic and doing that. But he always had one belief, which is that God has no grandchildren. If there is no, well, my dad was this or my mom was this. It's like, no, it's like when you get there, you're gonna have to look at him and say, this is where I'm at. So he said, and I don't care. He's like, obviously, I would prefer you to believe these things, but you can believe whatever you want, but you need to prove it to me. You need to be able to tell me why you believe this thing. So I I spent a long time being homeschooled as well, largely just, because it was just sort of I was getting A's and B's and everything, and I was basically sleeping through the classes. Not, and I would say it's not because I'm smart, because I'm not. I'm a dude who draws cartoons, but it's because just the education system is it's very slanted towards very rigid thinking instead of actually thinking for yourself. It doesn't actually promote education. They just want you as a few. Oh, I just forgot his name. I can see his name. The comedian. He was in Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure.
oh,
Anyway, uh, George Carlin. There it is. George Carlin famously said they don't want you. They want you just smart enough to pay your taxes and push the buttons, right? So, I spent a lot of time outdoors, but I also spent a lot of time reading and misspent youth in documentaries and reading on all kinds of different things. Went to, grew up going to the Creation Evidence Museum down in Biloxi, which is in Glen Rose, Texas, like only an hour and a half south of me. Um, but also just saying, hey, if you want to believe something different, you need to prove it to me, right? And so I just kept coming back to the best explanation for what you actually see, both in history and human nature and in the world around us, was the Bible. Like that is the best explanation for what we're seeing. And particularly when you get into the weirder things, UFOs and living pterosaurs and all kinds of these, cryptozoology, forbidden archaeology, right? All of these things are better explained through a biblical worldview than anything else I've ever encountered. And that doesn't mean there isn't room for conversation about what that actually means. There's a lot of nuance to it, but the broader worldview of what a biblical worldview is you would actually expect to find these weird things in the world around us rather than what we're taught in mainstream school, right? When I love the fact that people set up as science versus religion. It's not. It's two different religions versus each other, right? Because science is a tool, just like this pen, and this is an awesome pen. It has a level and a ruler, and you can do like this is my favorite pen in the world. It's just a little fidget pen I have here. But science is like this pen. It's just a tool, right? Science never tells you anything. Scientists tell you something. And oftentimes science is very heavily dependent on preconceived notions and assumptions more than anything else. How you interpret data is far more important than the data itself, 9 times out of 10. Great example of this was you could still find, whole documentaries and books and papers written on this in the 80s and very early 90s about how um, the American Indians here, right? The First Nations peoples, when they would go, particularly the Plains Indians, when they would make their stone arrowheads or spearheads or knives or anything like that, right? They would go off. Like it'd be the men. The men would go off and they would sacrifice and they would do magic rituals because what they were doing was magic and it was in this special place and no one could go near it. I mean, you could see this. Documentaries, whole things on it, right? However, in the early '90s, someone actually went and did some ethnography with tribes that are still currently essentially living a Neolithic existence, and what they found was they weren't doing anything like that. They were, making their tools at night around the fire, and then they just scooped up the flint sherds and they dropped them in a trash pile. So the reason people were finding these potsherds and animal bones and then the flint and the reason, or whatever stone was being used, whatever salacious material was being used to manufacture the blades and the arrow points and all that, the reason that we were finding that debris there was because it was a trash pile. So the data didn't change at all. The data was irrelevant. It was the preconceived notions of the archaeologists who for decades found this and said, oh, here's this big story. Here's this big thing. And everyone bought it hook, line, and sinker. But it was entirely wrong. The problem is science isn't, it's not science. Science is just the tool. The problem is we have really broadly two different religious viewpoints. You have an atheistic worldview, and then you have a theist worldview. Not specifically Christian, but a theistic worldview. That's what's at odds. These are two religious concepts. And science is basically the one of the realms in which this fight is happening. The problem is one side claims science as its total authority, when in reality, it is its own highest authority. And again, it actively manipulates the data that it has. Often my arguments with with people over things are not about the data itself, but rather the interpretation of said data. Now, there is information that is often removed from the data sets and data points, objects that are found, events, and they're usually written off because they fly in the face of the preconceived notion of that atheistic worldview, right? Because if certain things are real, then it really knocks their arguments out. But one point, a great point of this, that where it's like, here's data that everyone agrees is real, but where the fight is over would be like soft tissue being found in dinosaur bones, right? Hemoglobin, active hemoglobin. One of the reasons we know Tyrannosaurus Rex was related to birds, right? The chicken specifically is because we have found active hemoglobin, or technically heme, not the full hemoglobin, in in Tyrannosaurus rex bones, and that heme actually interacted with chicken antigens. Now, the obvious point is, the atheistic worldview is going to look at this and say, well, there must be a rational explanation for why this soft tissue and all these things are found in dinosaur bones when they're 65, 75, 80 million years old in some cases, 120 million years old in the case of some triceratops skulls. The problem is you don't have to be a genius to realize, well, that's crap. Organic material does not last that long. No matter how far or how long you try to push the half-life of any biological material, you're never going to get past 1,000,000 years. I mean, really, 15, 20,000 years is optimal. Like, that's about as good as you're ever going to get on biological material. But if you push it out as hard and fast as you can and just give it the most possible, that longest time period, 1,000,000 years, great. You are still 64 million years short of your target date. And that's the earliest target date. We've got stuff that's 120, that's supposedly 120 million years old, that we still have soft tissue on. So again, the data is the same. We have soft tissue in petrified bone. By the way, we also have dinosaur bones that were never fossilized. So the data is the same, but the presuppositions are different. One side says it has to be so many million, tens of millions of years old. The other side says, well, maybe it doesn't have to be that old. In fact, our worldview is that it's much younger than that, in the thousands of years old. That allows for, and by the way, with that thousands of years is an event that actually allows for the fossilization of these creatures to begin with. So when I say the reason I am a Christian is wasn't because I was raised a Christian per se, but because it matches the worldview of the Bible, matches with what we actually see in the world. That's why I'm a Christian. That's why I'm in this field doing this. I don't really care what Bigfoot ultimately is, right? Or whatever any cryptid is. Whatever any Forteana ends up actually being is irrelevant to me, because they're just points of data. Right? My life does not end or begin with Bigfoot or UFOs or anything. I think they're interesting data points that, when fully understood, will actually show us the world we live in better. That's what I care about. And I think the thing is, the clearer the picture becomes, the more it's going to be very clear that the Bible is true. Well, again, why does that even matter? Because it has a story to tell. It has a message for us that you, me, every person we've ever met, we're not random. We're not worthless. We are immortal creatures with eternal value, and that there is someone who created and loves us and wants to be with us and wants us to do better in our own lives, wants us to not hurt each other, wants us to treat each other like we're actually the family that we have been proven to be. And that there is a better world that can be made, but also that will be coming. And that, yeah, there's dark days ahead, very, very near, but that's also going to be okay.
Man, it's a good way to start this talk, and I totally agree with you on most of the things you said. It's not about proving if Bigfoot is real and all these cryptids are real. It's about understanding what the world is about. So, and there's a lot of things we don't understand. You've said it when you provided us with the example of the soft tissue with the dinosaurs and stuff. And when we talk about research and science, I wanted to say this before we started, because I think you referred to yourself in your bio as a paranormal researcher. I always had my problems with the term paranormal researcher. I don't think there's a proper way to really do research on all these phenomena, whether it's paranormal or UFO or cryptids, because all these strange things, they seem to play with us instead, don't you think?
Oh, yes. So, real quick, I actually called myself a biblical paranormal researcher to get people to ask the question, right? Dr. Dean Bertram, friend of mine, we did a show for a while. He would very much agree with you. He's very much a true Fortean, stating that the Fortean fields are outside of the scientific realm of endeavor because it's because no matter we don't have the ability to objectively observe it. I am largely, this is why I call it this, again, that's why it's a researcher more than anything else, because research is actually broader than what we tend to think. It's not just what you can put in a laboratory and poke with a stick, right? There's other aspects to it. I'm only slightly more optimistic. I think we can prove a phenomena exists. That doesn't mean we're going to understand what that phenomena is, right? Like I say all the time, we ain't got the Spookatron 5000 patent pending, right? We don't got that. We don't have any way to actually objectively observe something that is supernatural, right? Call it, use interdimensional, quantum, whatever you want to use, right? But the simple fact that it is supernatural. It is above, outside of whatever this pen is, right? Me, this pen, my dog, your computer. That's natural. That's part of this plane of existence. It lives here. It's natural here. Supernatural is above that. We don't have a way to objectively observe it. Now, a lot of people, I have a lot of paranormal researchers who are friends of mine, ghost hunters who are friends of mine. They said, well, what, you could argue, what about EMF readers? Okay. And by the way, just as a quick aside, we can come back to it later. If you're doing paranormal or cryptozoological investigations, you need to have an EMF reader and you should have a Geiger counter. We'll talk about that later. But all these things are doing, right? An EMF reader specifically is just saying there's an electrical field. You don't know that the thing that you're dealing with is an electrical field, right? Meaning you're measuring the thing itself. Is that electrical field a byproduct? Like essentially, if something's moving through water, that is the wake, right? Is that electrical field just a wake of it moving through? Or here's where it gets worse. Is it just screwing with you and manipulating your EMF reader? We don't know. We don't know which one it is. But is the EMF reader reading something? Yes. If you can't explain where that field is coming from, then that is a data point that there is something else going on that is not necessarily a natural phenomena. From again a scientific standpoint, that is valuable data. That is information. If you can show active communication between that field and other equipment. By the way, I do not suggest anyone tries to communicate with anything that is not material. It's like, guys, I don't need to talk to these things to know that they don't have your best interest at heart. But that's a whole other thing. But as a point of data, that is scientifically valuable, right? It's sort of like the whole, I always forget if it's, Neptune and Uranus. I think it's Uranus than Neptune. We discovered Neptune because Uranus was acting weird, right? Or maybe it was the other. I'm dyslexic, so I can always, it's one of the two. The orbit was odd. And they said, okay, so it wasn't that we found the planet first, we found the effect of the planet. That's sort of where we are with the supernatural. We can't see the supernatural itself, but we can see effects of it. That is scientifically valid. The problem that we have, and this is where we will accept that for 1,000 different things, but if it's supernatural, we won't accept it, right? Again, so much of modern physics is based on stuff we can't actually observe at all. What we're observing are the effects of this thing. And we take it as real. And we take it these theories as valid. But the supernatural one, again, like I said, the EMF reader, we don't know if you're actually observing the creature, if you're observing the wake of the creature, or if the creature's just straight up jacking with you. We don't know. But we know that that's a phenomena that does exist. We have erratic heat signatures that will generate out of nothing and disappear and will behave intelligently. We have random radiological signatures that will move and disappear. These are objectively measured phenomena with no known cause. That is prima facie evidence that there is a supernatural world, and therefore there is something there. But that's as far as science can go, right? Like people say, well, can science prove or disprove God? It can do neither. It can only suggest, right? Hey, does this world look designed or not? Well, again, that's largely based on preconceived notions, right? Now, I do think you can get there from here, but it can't say whether God is real or not, which is why when people say, oh, no one's scientifically proven God, it's like, well, congratulations. It can't. So that's not, so that's, it's a non sequitur. Science cannot prove angels and demons or ghosts or anything like that. But what it can say is there is a real phenomena, and this is what we can know scientifically. But then we need to look at other. Then at that point, we need to look at something else, right? It's like here's the confines of science. Let it be what it is. I don't need science to try and explain everything else. And by the way, what we call science is a very limited view of science. By the way, right? We tend to reserve science exclusively for laboratory observations,
Mm.
right? Again, things we can poke with the stick. Well, but that's great, but that's not how science works all the time. In fact, there's a ton of things that we observe that we can't poke with the stick, and we do our best with what we have. It doesn't mean it's not a scientific endeavor, it just means we need to understand and be realistic about what our parameters are, and then understand when do we move out of those realms, right? The problem is we want to shove it because let's be honest, the modern scientific movement has become its own. Like I said at the beginning, this is a war between two different religious worldviews. We've made the scientist the priest of the modern era, right? Whenever a government wants to say something and show, oh no, this is for your best, what do? We have the politicians bring up people and they make certain they're wearing white lab coats. It's like these people are doctors or scientists. They may be all these things. Half the time they're not, but they may be, but they're wearing suits because they're in the world. They don't need to have a white lab coat on, but we put the white lab coats on them to say, see, the smart people are telling you something. Well, I'm sorry. There's no difference between that and saying, well, here's priest so and so to tell you what's going on. It's the same thing. Because the thing about science is it doesn't matter if you're wearing a white lab coat or not. The question is, what data do you have? And can you prove your conclusions from the data? Have you done the work correctly? In fact, some of the greatest scientific endeavors and discoveries that have been made sort of outside the system and then brought into the system because the system, as people have often state, only change with funerals. Because you have one group of people that they had all their dissertations and their careers founded on certain ideas and concepts, and so they're not going to want to question those ideas and concepts because it's going to make them look bad if they were wrong.
Funny what you said with the scientists and in the white coaches, because here in Germany we say kitchen psychology. Like you
Mm-hmm.
said, see those guys wear these fancy dresses.
Mm-hmm.
They must know something. Yeah, of
Yeah.
course. Um, I think one has to differentiate between the phenomena that present themselves to us and the ones that we discover.
Yes.
There's, I think, yeah, I think one has to differentiate because I'm sure you've heard about the infamous jellyfish UFO that circled around the internet not too long ago. Have you seen it? Have you
Yes.
seen the pictures? It was filmed.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, let me say it for the audience who don't know.
Mm-hmm.
It was filmed in Iraq in 2018 and shows a strange object flying over a military base at a consistent speed, and it looks like some kind of jellyfish. And at some point, it submerged into the water and came back up after 17 minutes at an unbelievable speed, and so on and so on. But it looked, yeah, freaky. It looked very freaky. So I think I saw it and I thought, hmm, if you think you know then something like that appears and shows you that you know nothing and that you don't understand it. What is this thing about? And it was only seen on infrared, I think, on the infrared cameras. So, and the way it was shaped, I it was playing with us. This kind of stuff, it's making a fool out of us.
Well, so that one very, very specifically, there's some issues with that one. I think there's some people have gone back and done a little bit more research on it. And there's a really good argument for it being literally like there's this balloon arrangement that you could just buy commercially for a festival that occurs during that time, and that's really what it does look like. And that's why it's just moving and it's not really doing anything. But that's one theory that's out there. Again, I haven't looked into it too hard, but to your point, and I think there's a bigger point with that, which is the phenomena is very clearly screwing with us. Jacques Vallée, right? Um, and who's the other one? Keel, John Keel.
Thank you.
Yeah, they very. I mean, and even I mean, we'll focus on those two for a moment because they both were very, very clear with this. They flat out said, whatever this thing is, it isn't what it's appearing to be. And all you really have to do, I think one of the big problems we have with like the UFO in the UFO field right now is we are a field with full of amnesiacs. Essentially, with the exception of a few cases that happened before 1980, everything that is talked about today is only referenced from material post 1980. Again, people say, well, what about this event and this? It's like, yeah, those are all pre 1980 events, but they're cherry picked. They don't talk about things like the Hopkinsville goblins.
Oh yeah.
They don't talk about the Flatwoods monster, and we certainly don't really even. Again, Dr. Dean Bertram, I'll send you this information. You'd like to speak with him, but he's working on a thing on a documentary for the Shaver mystery, right?
Yeah.
For those who don't know, in amazing stories, back in the 40s, right, 30s and 40s, there were these stories where the ideas of flying saucers and all these things came out. And Richard Shaver was a gentleman who wrote a lot of these stories. I'm giving a very 50,000 foot view. He claimed that he was abducted by these things he called Darrow and Tarot, that were these beings that lived in the earth, that they were an ancient race. And if you get into everything that he was talking about, it's one-to-one modern ufology. All of the ideas that we talk about in the modern world of these, but for them, they started on Earth and moved to space, and then they moved into the inner Earth, right? Essentially a hollow Earth. And they were the things that were piloting UFOs, and they had this technology that could move you through walls. I won't steal his because you need to have him on. He'll go into a lot of detail on this story, but the simple fact of the matter is that is straight up with everything that you see in modern ufology today is right there in these stories. All of it. But here's the problem. All of those ideas, every single one, essentially, is found in earlier thoughts and earlier science fiction work in the 1800s. And it's found in fairy lore, and it's found in the lore of the Jinn. Every aspect of it. The problem is it is a phenomena that has clearly been here the entire time, but it's changing what it looks like, not just by the epic that it's in, but by the culture that it's in. Even today, they appear and change depending on what culture you're from. The idea of the gray with the big eyes, that's a modern idea. That happens in the 70s. They looked very, very different. Even Betty and Barney Hill, when they were abducted, when they were originally, those are the first sort of abductees in the modern time. They didn't describe them looking like grays as we know them today. In fact, Barney described them as looking. He said he thought they were Irishmen.
Yeah, with the big nose and stuff.
Yeah, with the big noses. And you're like, well, how did we get from Irishmen with big noses to to these big-headed, black-eyed, no-nose creatures? There's a lot going on there, right? And there's a lot going on with the U.S. intelligence services have been actively manipulating this phenomena, or at least how we interpret this phenomena, for I would argue since day one, but definitely since the early 80s and late 70s, actively engaging with disinformation. So it's not just that the phenomenon itself isn't consistent and that it's jacking with us. We have other entities, more human-based entities that have their own agenda that are also manipulating how we interpret and understand and interact with this phenomena. So it's not just UFOs. You could argue the Bigfoot phenomenon has a lot of the same problems, right? Right now, my current line of thinking is that you have there's evidence to suggest that there is a physical creature running around. Again, a very small population of physical, organic, naturally occurring creatures running around. But I'm almost to the point of saying 80% of all other interactions that get claimed to be Bigfoot aren't Bigfoot, that it's something supernatural that probably wants us to think it's Bigfoot, assuming it just doesn't have that form. Now, again, I can't say that the physical stuff isn't connected to the supernatural stuff, but it's very clear that there is a supernatural aspect to this that is not a physical ape man just hanging out, right? But it does want us to think that it is. So the problem, and again, I'm 30 seconds on a given day saying everything's supernatural, even the thing I saw, right? But there's reason to think that it wasn't. There's logical and rational reasons to think that there are living creatures that don't conform to our modern understanding of the world, that are naturally occurring. They're just being themselves, right? There's nothing weird. The problem is mixed in with that is the stuff that is genuinely weird, that is genuinely supernatural. And my fear is we try to materialize it so that we don't recognize it for what it is. Aleister Crowley, the occultist from the early 20th century, very famously said, "Today we call them angels and demons. Tomorrow we will call them something else."
Yeah.
And those who follow his work today, they still follow Crowley's religious works. They say that they still communicate with the demon lamb, the demon that he conjured that taught him the Enochian magics. But they now say he's not a demon. It's a race of telepathic aliens.
And he looked like a gray alien.
Yeah, exactly. Precisely. So it begs a lot of questions here. It's like, are we dealing with, like, if you were to put me and Giorgio Tsoukalos at a table, we would agree on this statement. The modern UFO phenomena, the aspect of it, at least that is legitimately weird, right? And not psyop and not experimental technology, all that. The stuff that's legitimately weird, that stuff is the exact same thing we've seen for thousands of years all throughout human history and is documented in ancient texts, particularly the Bible. We would fully agree on that statement 100%. The difference is he would say, "Oh, we got it wrong back then. They're actually aliens from another planet or another realm of existence." I would suggest we got it right the first time. We know what they are. And it's something that is constantly changing and evolving its face and its allure and its lore to match our culture, to match our worldviews, and to hide what it really is, so that we don't recognize it, because it has its own agenda, which is ultimately our destruction.
That's the question. I always ask that myself, sitting here breaking my head about it. We know reports from the tribe of the Dogon, or from the Zulu warriors. We have in the mythology of the Zulu warriors, the moon hasn't always been here. The moon
Mhm.
came here. I think they say, I don't know, 10,000 years ago. I don't know what. Um, but it was brought here by reptilian beings, which they call the Water Brothers, and they stole it from the big dragon in the universe. That's what the Zulu say, and that's very interesting coming from those ancient tribes. That makes it interesting. And the Dogon talk about these beings that came here, and they're half amphibian and half humanoid. So these reports are very interesting, and I always wonder, was the phenomena the same in ancient times back then? um Presented it Did it present itself the same way as it does now? Were people as confused as we are, or was it different for some reason? I don't know, man. That's very strange. That's a good question. But I want to address a few other things before we
Yeah,
keep on.
please do.
You've mentioned the Hopkinsville goblins case.
Hmm.
People tend to laugh about it sometimes. I find it fascinating. It's a very
Hmm.
interesting case, and most of the people say it was owls. It was
Yeah.
owls. They said it was owls, and there's a connection between
Hmm.
owls and the phenomena too. I think there's this guy.
There
I
is.
think his name Mike Cleland is his name, and if
Hmm.
you type in owls and UFOs, you get tons of stuff only from him. That's very interesting. I think there's a connection with owls or
Hmm.
with other animals too, but especially
Yeah.
owls. They have something I don't know in common with the phenomena. What do you think?
So you're right that a lot of people assign a lot of things to owls. Owls seem to be very busy according to a lot of people. Um, from a Fortean standpoint, they're the stand-in for Mothman and Owlman and everything that they don't want to deal with becomes an owl somehow. I've always been fascinated by that. It's like
Yeah,
you know
sorry
you
to
think these
interrupt
owl.
you because they
Mhm.
were in mythology also.
Right. Yeah. I'm about to get to that. Yeah. In modern times, when they want to dismiss things, they're always owls. But yeah, to your point, it is very clear that there is a connection with owls, right? You go all the way back again, Lilith, and it's the demoness, is associated with owls, right? But the Ilum itself, which is sort of the broader idea of Lilith, is part of the Ilum. I've got a friend. Long story short, he had an encounter and there was an owl involved. That it wasn't an owl when he was sort of in a dream state looking at it. It wasn't an owl, or it was an owl, but he realized it wasn't an owl again in this dream state. Instead, it was a thing. It's like he didn't realize it could see him. It was this eye. It was this giant eye. When he woke up, though, he hears this screeching of an owl. Looks out, and the owl, and there was an owl where he had been looking in the dream state, and it flew off. Right. So, I mean, even today, there is a weird association with owls. If you look at, again, going back to Lilith, though, right? If you look at Lilith, Lilith has several similar there's similar creatures associated in far off and far distant unconnected cultures, right? Like in Papua New Guinea, I can never pronounce the name of this thing. Essentially, it's the same theory, right? That it's a demon that takes the form of a witch, but it will turn, at night it turns into a giant bat. Well, because they have fruit bats there, right? That fly at night. And then they go and they kill children. They drain the life force of children, just like Lilith was an owl, drains the life of children. It does appear that a lot of malevolent entities, either because of our interpretation of the night and whatever the night means to us, maybe that may be a part of this whole thing is our association with it, or because they have to tell us what they are. The connection to the owl seems to be in a lot of things like jackals or serpents may be more of a typology where they have to tell us what they are, right? They are connecting to these ideas of the night or of death, of the unknown. It may be that it may be that there's a deeper connection, but I'm starting to think that a lot of this stuff is far more culturally connected than we realize, and that we may have as important a role in how it takes form based on our cultural assumptions, our cultural understandings, than anything else, right? If these things are, as I've stipulated, supernatural entities, right, then they are above us in ways that we don't understand. In the same way that if we were to try and interact with Super Mario, right, from the old 8-bit game, right, he would be a two-dimensional creature. We're three-dimensional creatures. We would have to take steps to interact with him in a way that he could even understand it. It may be that these creatures that are because they are a higher dimension. They are required to interact with us in ways that allow us to even understand what we're dealing with through imagery and association, not just, cultural, religious, all of that. that may be why we see these constant themes of owls and serpents and wolves or death, right? Is that they're interacting with us in ways that we can comprehend it because we are a lower dimensional being. So I don't think it's a coincidence that owls keep popping up, whether it's, you know, modern ufology or ancient mythology. I don't think that's a coincidence at all. The question though is, well, why is it that why does that connection exist? Because owls are just owls, right? They're just birds. And I think there may be a deeper understanding of how we view the universe. If this universe is may be far more dependent on our perception of it and our understanding and our uh, own consciousness than we realize.
Interesting thoughts. Very interesting. Owls used to be messengers. Ancient people referred to
Mhm.
owls as messengers, and they always had bad messages most of the
Yeah,
time.
they're
And
bringing you taxes and stuff. Yeah.
yeah, all this shit. And somehow owls, with these mythologies of owls,
Hmm.
traveled all over the world for some reason, besides other things. So, for example, there's the White Lady is everywhere. Here,
Yes.
where I live in
Yes.
Germany, in a small village in Germany,
Hmm.
I don't
Yep.
know, 500 people or even less. We have stories about the White Lady waiting on the roadside, and please don't stop if you
Hmm.
see her. Don't let her get in
Hmm.
because she will fucking kill you, or you have an accident, or she will, I don't know, snatch your children, stuff like that. So the White Lady at the
Yes.
castle, we have
Hmm.
all these stories traveled, and we created our own phenomena, I think. Somehow, yeah, some of these phenomena are created
Hmm.
by ourselves. What do you think?
No, I'm right there with you. In fact, hold on.
Yeah.
Right here. One of my books, Metroplex Monsters. Hold on, I got a whole spiel. Dallas Demons, Fort Worth Goatmen, and Other Terrors of the Trinity River. Available wherever fine books and trashy rags are sold. Um, one of the things I did when I was reviewing this is because it's a love letter to where I grew up, right? Which is the Dallas Fort Worth Metroplex. That's why I did it, but it also got a chance to talk about Bigfoot here, the living pterosaurs here. But the White Rock Lake, right? Um, we've got our own lady in white and our own goat men, right? And one of the things I noticed while doing research for this book is how often certain themes keep popping up, right? Where it's like the mythologies being recycled. And so the question becomes, are we seeing a tradition that's being passed down over thousands of years, right? Or is it that this is sort of an aspect of this phenomena? Because again, we've got a lady in white, and there's plenty of reasons. A lot of the problem is there's multiple stories about how she came to be. The problem is they're all real. Like these are real, actual events in history. Now the story about her that everyone that gets told is clearly a folklore that has been passed down, is connected to other thoughts, right? Here in the U.S. we have a lot of what are called iron truss bridges, right?
Mm.
Almost everyone has a hangman's uh story, right? Where a guy was hanged from this iron truss bridge, and now his spirit haunts it. He may have been evil, he may have been good but unjustly murdered, things like that, right? But they're all variants of the same theme. But a lot of these themes can trace back to ancient Greece. So on one hand, you want to say, well, maybe it's just these thoughts keep circulating in our heads from tradition. The problem is, like you point out, the white lady, you can find that in Asian communities on the other side of the planet. They have a version of that story. Papua New Guinea, uh, even earlier uncontacted tribes here in southern and South America, they have very, very similar stories. Clearly different, different fine details, right? In slightly different interpretations, but it's very clearly the same phenomena, which makes no sense unless there is sort of a slightly larger, more objective reality to this phenomena that takes it far outside of folklore and makes it and just says, look, no, this thing's real, whether you like it or not. Again, it may have a lot of cultural um, connotations to it and connections and interpretations. I famously say, uh, folklore is not phenomena, right? We say, well, whatever the folklore is, that's what it is. Like, no, that's the folklore around the phenomena. It's not the phenomena itself. But the phenomena is clearly very, very real. These are not just cultural, you know, urban legends that get passed down from generation to generation and keep changing. We are interacting with something. Going back to the original point, science can show that something is happening. There's a reality here. We just don't know what that reality is, and where does our cultural context, our preconceived notions about the world, the way we understand the world, where, how does that interact with this phenomena? We can't say yay or nay to it. We don't know where one ends and the other begins. And it may be that there is no point of delineation. It may be far more intertwined than would make us really comfortable, right? And that may also account for a lot of the weirdness. Maybe part of the weirdness is because this stuff genuinely exists in this Michael Heiser called it the invisible realm, right? It's a realm that is, because it's higher than ours. It's very, very different from ours. That it's entirely possible the way we understand the universe may be how it has to interact with us. So there may not be a hard and fast line to it. It is clear that there is its own reality, right? That it is separate from us, but it may have to be intertwined with us when it's here on this side, that it lives within our stories in a way, in a very real way, that it's existing within our cultural understandings. And so that's why today they're UFOs and aliens, and 100 years ago they were Darrow and antediluvian rejects from Atlantis, and then a few hundred years before that they were fairies, and before that they were Jinn, and before that, it's like maybe that's because it is living in these stories, and that's how they can interact with us, is through that folklore. Not that it's not doing something independent of the folklore, but rather it needs that folklore to interact with us, to have access to us, because even that folklore may protect it as long as we don't recognize it for what it really is. It may be that provides it the camouflage and the access that it needs to you to do whatever it is it wants to do.
Man, I'm really down with most of the things you say. It's very, very interesting. And you said maybe it's living through these or with these with the folklore. That's interesting. I immediately had to think about how these UFO reports changed over the
Mm-hmm.
years. In the 70s, UFO looked like this. In the 80s, they looked like this. In the 90s,
Mm-hmm.
it was like a maybe triangle shaped, or it was orbs. And now we have tic tac UFOs. We have so it's I don't know. Every every century had its own UFO shapes. So that's
Mm-hmm.
also strange to me. And the aliens in the 70s looked like this, and in the 80s they looked like that. And yeah,
And
yeah.
they keep changing their tune as far as why they're here, what they want from us,
Yes.
right? First they're just these unknowable things, then they're the space brothers, and then they're it's like the stories keep changing, they keep changing.
Yeah.
And again, their level of technology keeps changing too, right? They keep seemingly, it seems like their development and how the technology works and what it looks like keeps changing with our technological advancements, right?
Yeah.
And it's very, very, again, very interesting now that everyone's talking about the interdimensional thing, right? Everyone's talking about that. And even from the government. And this was probably 10 years ago now. I'm getting old. Uh, guy that I was talking, that I worked with, he was like, yeah, I don't believe in things like angels and demons. And I just stopped. I'm like, hold on. You believe that there are that there are these entities that are energy based that come from from a different plane of existence, right? He's like, yeah, like a higher vibrational dimension, right? He goes, yeah, yeah, absolutely. I'm like, okay, great. And how is it different from an angel? And he just stopped because I hadn't thought about it that way. Well, that's sort of the whole point, right? C.S. Lewis in the Screw Tape Letters very famously wrote, I'm going to sum up this quote. For those of you, if you've never read the Screw Tape Letters, I do highly recommend it. It's a great book, but essentially it's an older demon talking to a younger demon on how to damn souls. That's what it's about, right? Well, there's a point where he's discussing whether or not to make there's this big conversation about making someone, is it good to make them intellectual or to make them stupid, to make them a witch or to make them a materialist, right? And in the whole conversation, he's like, the problem with a witch is that while they're very, very fun to torment directly and interact with directly, the problem is at some point they're going to have to think about God. And he said you can lose them that way. The problem of a materialist, though, is that you can't play with them. They're no fun. But the aspect of it that's preferable for the demon is they will never think about God. So you never actually lose them. And then he speculates that they could develop a way of thinking about what he called the materialist witch. So it's someone who could see and interact with the supernatural, but never ascribe to its supernatural properties or meaning. That it would always be a material thing. And we see this with a lot of these UFO abductions, not necessarily abductees, not necessarily the ufologists themselves, where um, there was this very, very lovely young woman years ago who was very public about how she had been abducted for years. She had her eggs harvested, hybridized children, the whole nine yards. And you listen to her stories, and it's like, and again, I've heard it 100 times from 100 different people. It's Stockholm syndrome, where they're talking about how, oh no, yeah, they brought me on board their ship and they said that they had a problem with it, so they needed to take out some bone marrow, and it was like excruciatingly painful, and I'm like, whoa, 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 whoa. Why are they having to do a painful process on you? We wouldn't even do that with our level of technology. These things can supposedly bend time and space, but they don't have Novocaine, right? And you hear these stories of these people being abducted and they're terrified, and there's these hugely humiliating and painful experiments being performed on them. But they're like, oh no, it's a good thing. It's Stockholm syndrome. But because they're here, they're material creatures, they're here to help. They need our help. And they told me that I had actually agreed to this in a previous life. They'll have these stories. Well, all that's managed to do is say, well, hold on, a creature's abducting you in the middle of the night, torturing you, assaulting you. I don't know what all the regulations are. So assaulting you in a very unpleasant manner, right? I don't want to get you taken down. Um, that sounds an awful lot like a demon to me. Like, well, they can't be because they're aliens and they're good people. They just need our help. It's entirely materialized. Again, as I mentioned, I think there's really good evidence for there being a physical Bigfoot. But there is very clearly the spiritual thing, that supernatural thing and spiritual thing that wants us to think that it's Bigfoot. Well, why? People keep asking, why does it want us to think it's Bigfoot and not something else? And by the way, I think it's probably 100 other things as well, right? Dogman is probably the easiest, but like Dogman and all these other things, all these other cryptids. For me, a cryptid is a material, naturally existing creature. The problem is we keep shoving all these things in that are clearly not. But why would it want to be known as a Bigfoot? Well, the same reason it wants to be known as an alien, so that you don't recognize it for what it really is, and it can move and operate unmolested, uninterrupted. Because what happens when we have a UFO encounter? People run out there, right? Same thing with Bigfoot. What happens is people run out there to that one spot and they look around, and we leave food. We knock on trees. We collect evidence. Same thing with UFO researchers. We run out there and we look at it and we take pictures. Well, let me ask you this one question. Where's the line between research and worship?
It's a good question. There's no line.
Yeah. which is a terrifying thought for me as someone who's a researcher. It's like, well, hold on. I mean, there is a reason why even 100 years ago, everywhere, you don't talk about these things. You don't use their names, right? That's why they were given these like the other folk, the little people, the good the other neighbors. We had protocols for interacting with this stuff, which is that you don't eat their food. You don't take things from them. You don't talk to them. You don't use their names. You do certain things to keep your house protected. We used to have protocols for this stuff because people were willing to admit that the supernatural was real. We don't have that anymore. You're superstitious now. Now, again, look at all the 100 things that we'll do. They're completely useless, but they're supposed to ward. It's no different than you wearing this amulet to ward off an evil spirit. It's the same thing, except we dress it up with science, right? But for the supernatural, it's like, no, that's all superstition. Well, what if it's not? What if this reality is that these things have been trying to interact with us for thousands of years, but we learned, again, traditional Christian exorcism techniques will end abductions. I'm not saying there isn't a material reality to abductions, but far more of them appear to be ethereal. It appears to be spiritual in nature rather than physical in nature. There is a clear connection to the supernatural. Well, maybe the thing is, as we've become more scientific, right? We've bowed to that atheistic religious worldview. It has left us vulnerable to manipulation and experimentation by these things. What were they doing thousands of years ago? They were creating hybrids. What are they doing now? They're creating hybrids. What did they do back then? They created a one world government that they ran. What are all the ufologists saying? It's like, don't worry, when they come back, they're gonna fix everything. I remember I think it was even season 3 of Ancient Aliens. David Hatcher Childress said, well, when they come back, they'll give us the technology and then we'll be like the gods. And I'm like, whoa, you literally just quoted Genesis here. That's Genesis 3. And then it didn't take, I think it took 2 more seasons before they came out and said, yeah, Satan's actually the good guy. He's actually the good guy of the story. And you're like, whoa, 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 whoa. What do little green men from Clendathu have to do with this? It's like, why is there such a direct connection between little green men and what we would call New Age religious thought, right?
Yeah.
Why is there a one-to-one there? What did the Watchers exchange for human women in the Book of Enoch? Knowledge about the universe, technology. What is when Eisenhower supposedly went missing for 3 days? Well, he did go missing for 3 days, but supposedly he made this contract with these aliens. Right? For what? We get their technology, they get access to us for experimentation. It's the same damn story. But instead, they were angels back then and they're aliens now. Again, my difference with Giorgio Tsoukalos is maybe we got it right the first time. And as long as we don't recognize them for what they are, then we won't stop them from doing what they're doing. And
Right.
we remain vulnerable. I co-hosted with Tex for years over in Texas Front Porch. He came up with this. I kick myself for not coming up with it because it's such a great observation. He calls it sudden acute possession.
Hmm.
How often do we hear of people just everything's fine and then they commit suicide,
Mhm.
or everything seems to be going fine, but then, or maybe they're having a little trouble in their life, but then they lash out and they brutally assault someone or themselves. And what is it that they say over and over and over again? I don't know what happened. It was like I was no longer in control of my body. It's like I was watching myself do this thing. Brutal, terrible things will be done in these states. Maybe it's not a coincidence that they all say, I don't know what came over me, because something did come over them. I don't again, I don't care what Bigfoot is. I do care how people live their lives. I do care that we are healthy, emotionally, physically, and psychologically. I do care that we don't hurt each other. I do care that that we live in accordance with God, that we get, because I don't want anyone to perish eternally. But also, I don't want anyone to perish physically on this plane of existence either. If, you know, and until that's a reality we have to deal with, but we don't have to make it harder for ourselves. We don't have to make life more painful, but it seems like we tend to go out of our way to do that. We go out of our way to hurt each other. And I don't think it's entirely our fault all the time, but it is our fault if we remain vulnerable to these things. If we don't realize that not every thought in our head is ours, that sometimes we are being whispered to by things that do want to destroy us, that do want our destruction. And it's not just you and me, it's the upper echelons of power. Like, I don't think they're transforming reptilian critters running around running the world. I think they're just people. But I do think they're people who don't always listen to the angels. I think to get that much power, sometimes you're listening to the wrong people, the wrong supernatural critters, and they don't like us very much. They do want to destroy us. That's why my two favorite, this is going to sound off kilter. Just give me 2 seconds on it. My two favorite Twilight Zone episodes, I recommend everyone watches them. First is The Obsolete Man. Everyone needs to watch that right now. But the second one is The Howling Man. Long story short, for, you know, I'll spoil a 60-year-old episode here. Long story short, after World War I, dude goes traipsing through the Carpathian Mountains, gets caught in a storm. He's very sick. He winds up in a monastery, and there's this dude who's locked up, and he's just howling and screaming all the time. The only thing keeping him in is this staff. And it comes up later, he's like, why can't you just take the staff off and walk out of the cell? He's like, don't ask those questions right now. At the end of it, he lets the guy out. It's Satan. And after that, we have World War II. And then the guy goes to dedicating himself to finding Satan. He finally gets him locked up one more time. And he's like, I'm calling the brother. We're going to get him locked up. We're going to seal him away for good, only to be let out by the maid at the end of the episode, right? And the whole point, he says, you know, there's this big conversation between him and the brother that runs this monastery. He says, you're telling me that everything bad in the world happens because of this guy in this cage? He goes, no, 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 no. Humans are very good at hurting each other, right? We don't need any help to be evil, but we do need help to do great evil. We need a lot of help to do really spectacularly big, terrible things like World War I and ostensibly World War II. We have our own foils and flaws. We have our own, you know, we don't need a lot of help being bad, but we do need help being very bad. We do need help just randomly inflicting great amounts of pain on people. It's not a coincidence. I don't think it's a coincidence that everyone has, if you look at the classic understanding of a werewolf from the Eastern European tradition, a man doesn't transform, but he's done something that has made him vulnerable, and then he gets possessed by a demon. And then he goes out and commits greater crimes like cannibalism. The Wendigo here in America, people have gotten that way blown out of proportion, but it's the same thing. You commit some sort of cultural taboo, and then you become possessed by this thing, and one of the things that you do is you commit cannibalism. I don't think it's a coincidence that we have all of these serial killers who run around, and cannibalism is a big aspect of all of this behavior. This is not a coincidence. It's not a coincidence that the Nephilim ate humans. It's not a coincidence that so many of these UFO knots there's an account of them feeding on humans. This theme is not random. It's because, again, there is a broader reality. The supernatural hurts us. We're not protected from it if we don't protect ourselves from it. And I would argue there's a lot of people, and yes, I would even argue a lot of Western Christians, because they don't do what they're supposed to do to protect themselves, have made themselves vulnerable to it. And this is why everything seems to be going, you know, maybe somebody has some problems in their life, but then they commit suicide randomly out of nowhere. or they commit some terrible crime. And you're like, what happened? Why did they just snap? We never ask, was there something in their lives watching, waiting to destroy them? But we don't talk about that because it doesn't fit within the modern religion, the modern atheist worldview that is promulgated to us. And said, no, 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 it's science. So reality is nothing more than this pen. Because you can poke it with a stick. That's all that's real. That nothing else is real than that. Because the guy in the white lab coat said so. Forget all of human history. Forget everything we actually see. There's nothing out there hiding for you in the dark, waiting to destroy you, calling to you to do evil. That's not real. Because the white lab coat said so. All of this, the reason it matters is because the world is, again, I go back to the biblical worldview. Biblical worldview says, oh yeah, there is stuff out there in the dark. There's also stuff in the light. But you have to choose the light. You choose that, you hold on to it to protect you from that stuff, because this world's already hard enough as it is. We made it that way, but it's hard enough as it is. We don't need their help. But if you make yourself, but we often have made ourselves victims unnecessarily, because these things hide as all these little things. And it's clear that they're screwing with us. It's clear that they're playing with us. Everyone talks about tricksters, trickster spirits, changing shape, changing form, changing message. That seems to fit a very familiar pattern with what we've seen over the last 60 years.
So that means the only way to protect ourselves from these, let's call it bad entities, some call it archons, I don't know, is to live a good life, do good, and but nobody's doing good all the time. We all do bad things.
Yeah.
We all open at least a little door and do something bad in our lives. So there's always a chance to get occupied by, I don't know, a bad entity or whatever you want to call it.
I have very recently taken up gardening. I'm terrible at it. I have never been good at gardening in my life. Again, it's Texas, right? Things don't like to grow here. So it takes my father could make anything grow. I was amazed, but I have recently taken up gardening, and I have learned something really interesting. And I do mean for years. I looked at at plants and gardening like, well, I just want to set it up and then walk and get it done in such a way so I can just walk away from it and leave it as is, right? And it'll grow and it'll be fine. It doesn't work that way. You can't leave it and forget it. You're either constantly tending that garden, or it's going to get taken over by weeds, insects, whatever. All of the above. Part of the gardening means, yeah, there's going to be weeds that pop up, but you remove them when they do. You're either constantly tending that garden or it's going to seed. That's it. There is no, oh, well, look, I got it pretty. I got it just the way I want it. I can walk away. No. Our own lives are like that. Either you're constantly tending to it, and again, like you said, we're all going to do bad. Yes, all the time here, right? Like Paul said, I am the chief of sinners. But you take it and you pull that weed out. Doesn't mean the weeds aren't going to get in, just means you take care of them when they do. You're constantly tending to it. But the only way to constantly tend to it is to have something that says this is what you're supposed to do. So I look back to the Bible. It's like, this is what God wants. This is who God is. This is what he wants from us. This is how he wants us to live. And we live in accordance with that. It's not a rule book. It's a book of principles. It's a book that wants you to communicate with God. That's it. That's all it is. It does tell us where we are and where we came from and where we're going, but that's the big question is, are you being the person he made you to be, that he died for you to become? That's it. Again, not living a perfect life, but being someone who's trying to tend to that garden the best you can and let him take up where you leave off. Doesn't mean it's going to be easy. Doesn't mean bad things aren't going to happen. Doesn't mean that weeds aren't going to show up, but it does mean you're able to pull them out when they do show up. The problem is we have a lot of people who aren't, and a lot of people who claim to be Christians who aren't tending to that garden, and the weeds take over. And maybe they put pretty pictures up or they put statuary up or whatever to make it look like, oh, no, 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 everything's fine. But the weeds are choking the life out of everything. There's a phrase I heard years ago, and I love it. It's called cut flower philosophy. And the point that they make is once you've removed a flower, you can cut a flower like a rose off of a rose bush and put it in a jar of water, and it'll look very beautiful for a few days, maybe a week. You put like some Sprite in it, maybe 2, but it's going to die. It's inevitable that it's going to die because you've cut it from the thing that gave it life. If you allow weeds into your life, it'll choke all of those flowers. It'll kill them eventually. We are a society, if you're a human and you remove yourself from that branch, the vine that gives you life, and you just, well, here, I'm going to put myself in my own little water. We got some Sprite in it. It's all good. Look at how beautiful it is. Yeah, but you're gonna die. That's an inevitability. We got to get back into that vine. We need to be back into the garden where it's like, yeah, I can't do this completely on my own. That's never going to work. That's why we need each other. That's why we need God. Doesn't mean I'm not going to run across or foul these things, but does mean I can tell you one thing. Texting them, they don't hate it. They love it when I go out there working with them, but I avoid when they're like, okay, we're going to go check out the cemetery and do where all the high strangeness occurs out in Brown Springs. I don't go there because when I'm there, the high strangeness does not occur. The high strangeness does not occur around me ever. And the one time it kind of did, it didn't involve me. It went around me. And a lot of people say, okay, what's going on? Well, I'm sorry. I know many other Christian researchers who are like, yeah, we don't see the things y'all are seeing. Literally, I had one, I don't know if she'll let me use her name. One friend of mine, very big researcher, she was out with a lot of people and they were seeing orbs moving back and forth. And she's like, I don't see anything that you're talking about. And this woman, by the way, has a video from one of her friends it's the best video of an orb I've ever seen in my life. I mean, straight up, like there's no question. But she's like, I don't see these things you're talking about. I'm not seeing these lights and all this. And one guy's like, he's like, I can see it over your head. They were all freaking out. She's like, I don't see anything. Because it doesn't interact with her, doesn't interact with me, doesn't interact with Chester Moore and many other Christian researchers because we're protected. Doesn't mean it's not real. Doesn't mean stuff isn't going to happen to us. Because I've been in a situation where I'm like, something is very, very wrong. I knew for a fact. I had my gun pulled because I knew something was trying to kill me. Yeah, I wasn't scared. Please understand the words coming out of my mouth. I was not scared, but I knew with ontological certitude that my life was in danger in the woods. And no sound, no nothing. It wasn't like I heard, there's some black bear out there. There's probably a loose tiger out there. There's definitely some cougars, things like that. Like there's probably some meth heads, where we were. Like there's reason to think that something out there would kill me. But again, I've been in really dangerous situations and I'm like, whatever, right? It's Texas. This is how we roll. But this was very different. I knew it's like, no, something's here to kill me. So I'm not saying that you're not going to come across these things, but you're not vulnerable to them in the same way. I mean, that's just what it is because there is a reality to these things. Again, this is why I go back to why do I call myself a biblical paranormal researcher? It's to ask the question because I keep pointing back. I think the Bible is real. I think the message of it is true. And I think that the problem is we all in our lives, even myself, we try and find a way to avoid that reality from time to time. We want to paint that away because it asks us to do the one thing that no human wants to do, and that is admit that we are not God, that we are not in control.
Yeah,
The
sure.
great illusion of control is that you actually have it. You've never had control over anything. What's the one thing in every religion agrees on this. The first thing, if you actually want to make your life better, is remove the illusion of control. We don't, and what's worse is in the Fortean field, you know what we don't do? We don't have a lick of control over it.
We
Because
don't,
it's something that's not this pen. It's something higher, it's something more dangerous, and it definitely has an agenda for us.
yeah. We don't have control and we don't know nothing about it. And you said something interesting. You said the Bible is not a rule book. I think so too. I think Bible is a book of explorations, observations, ideas maybe. And I think that nobody knows how the world really works. We don't understand how the world works. Therefore, we don't really understand what good and bad is. I always think about that. We don't really
Mhm.
know what good and bad is. At one point we decided ourselves what good and bad is, but we don't know how the world really
Mhm.
works. We don't know that. So what is bad? What is good? Is it bad if I walk through the grass and kill 20 ants? We say it's bad to shoot a man, to kill a man. It's bad. But we kill animals like like it was nothing. We kill so many animals to eat them. Is that good? I don't know, man. Maybe it's not
Mhm.
bad if you kill an animal to eat it. Let's say you live out in the woods, you kill a rabbit and eat it and use its fur, but we kill millions of pigs, millions of cows,
Mhm.
and half of it we throw away because nobody consumes it. We
Yep.
produce too much, we kill too much. And
Mhm.
are we good, therefore, or are we bad, therefore? What is good
And
and what is bad? Who decides what good and bad is?
well, first of all, cows have it coming. Secondly, that's a joke. But
I get,
but to your point though, it's like it's also even if it's okay to do it, are we doing it the right way? Like one of my favorite things, and this is one of those things that a lot of people are like, oh, it's silly that people who are Torah observant, I'm not, but people who aren't, they can't have a cheeseburger, right? Because it's very explicit. You don't in the Old Testament, you don't boil a calf in its mother's milk, right? And that's not a specific. People will say, well, what's the difference between it's cheese and a cow? They're all probably different cows and all that. That's not the point of that of the Old Testament. Everyone's like, oh, it's a rule. It's not a rule book. It's telling you how to think about these things. There is a constant understanding. It keeps popping up time and time again throughout Scripture that God cares about the animals. It's like, yeah, these things were given here for you to be a steward of, and yeah, there's legitimate uses, but also you have to treat them with a certain level of respect. You have to treat them with a level of humanity. So it's not just even if it's not just a yes or no, is it okay that we eat them? It's also a question of, well, how are you raising them? How are you treating them? Are you regarding them correctly? But it's, and so much of what's actually good and evil is more about, particularly in the Old Testament, it's more about purpose than it is sort of this idea that there's an objective standard. Like we have this very Greek understanding of perfection, right? Like the idea of the forms, like there's a perfect circle, there's a perfect triangle, and perfection is meeting that sort of objective standard. The thing is, in the Old Testament, it's much more Aristotelian in a way, where it's more about use. What is the purpose of this thing? What is the intended use or the intended purpose of this? Are you doing and living the way that you are intended to? Are you living in accordance with the purpose that was divinely inspired in this thing? Um, a better understanding of sin with sort of that view is I have a glass vase, right? There's a lot of things I could do with the glass vase that are perfectly fine, right? I could put flowers in, I could put water in it, I could put, decorative glass beads in it, and that's fine. Like there's like it has a lot of uses, and that's fine. But sin is when I try to use it to hammer in a nail. And the reason it becomes a sin is I break the glass vase and the nail doesn't get driven in. So the thing I was supposed to do, which is drive in the nail, that doesn't get done. And I've caused damage and destruction to something because I was using it in a way it wasn't intended. That's a better understanding of what the Old Testament is trying to talk to you about and tell us what is right and wrong, right? It's giving us principles of how to interact with humanity, how to live with one another, right? Love in the throughout the entire Bible isn't, hey, I feel really cool about you, dude. Like I have good, warm, gushy feelings. That is, to quote Tina Turner, what's love got to do with it, right? It's not a secondhand emotion, as she would say. Love is, are you doing the thing that is best for that person? Are you encouraging them mentally, physically, spiritually? Are you taking care of them mentally, physically, and spiritually? Right? In the story of the Good Samaritan, Jesus asked the question, who's being the better neighbor? Right? Is it the one who passes by, or the one with the wealth and the power who passes by, or is it the poor man who takes care of the injured person? Right? It's telling us how we're supposed to live. And it's very, very hard because it asks us to give up control of our own destinies in a way. It asks us to care about each other more than we care about ourselves, or at least as much as we do. It calls us not to live a lie. And the problem is the first person we ever lie to is ourselves, so that we can get what we want. We can feel better or even worse about ourselves. We like to lie to make ourselves feel bad because that gives us a sense of moral superiority now, right? We no longer value the victor, we value the victim. So if we can make ourselves feel like the victim, then we're in the right. And anything I want to do is correct. It asks us to give up both standards and not lie to ourselves. And unfortunately, lying to ourselves is a lot easier than facing the truth of ourselves sometimes, and the truth of reality. Again, the truth is we don't have any control. We don't understand what's really going on here. And that's a very humbling thing. It's a terrifying concept that we don't really know what's going on in the world that we live in. And it's like, okay, well, if I can't trust myself, and by the way, I shouldn't be trusting the people in the white lab coats or the people with the suits behind them, right? Because they don't know any better than I do. And in fact, it's constant throughout scripture. Hey, these guys with all the power, they're the bad guys. Because what they're listening to and what drives them, then who do I put my faith and trust in? Well, because that's where God comes in. So you're supposed to put it here and understand he's going to guide you. It's not always going to be easy. It's not always going to be fun. And sometimes it's going to cost you some stuff along the way. But that stuff's worth giving up anyway. Right? The drug addict who's strung out, it's better if they gave it up anyway, right? I've worked in too many homeless shelters for too long to see how destructive that stuff is, right? A lot of people say, why does God have all these rules about what to do and what not to do? Well, for the same reason you tell your 4-year-old to brush their teeth. They don't want to brush their teeth. They want to eat chocolate cake and stay up late. But that's not good for them. It'll destroy them. It'll kill them in the long run. We've seen what that looks like. We know what child neglect looks like. And neglect isn't just deliberately harming them. It's not doing what's best for them. God knows what's best for us because he made us and he has a higher view on it. We're no different from that 4-year-old that just wants to eat chocolate cake and never brush her teeth. When I take my dog to go get its shots, it's looking at me like, what is going on? Why am I at this terrible place with all these terrible people in the white lab coats, which are clearly white, like lab coat just means terrible person. And as far as this episode is concerned, I like doctors, I like scientists, but whatever. But my dog doesn't understand that I'm saving her life, that I'm keeping her safe. She doesn't understand it because she can't. She's a dog. In the same way, we don't often understand why these rules or why God is telling us these things are good, these things are bad. Live this way, don't live this way. And it's like, but this way is more fun. Yeah, but it's bad. It is destructive. And some of the destructive aspect is you open yourself up to these things that want you to do terrible things, that want you to hurt your family members, that want you to hurt you.
You know, one reason why I do not believe in God, or let's say in the biblical God, I do believe there is
Mhm.
something around us, something or somebody must have created all of this. I'm sure about that. One reason why I don't believe in a God is because I don't understand what it is. I don't understand, and I
Mhm.
can't be sure if whatever it is not messing with me. And we talked about it. Something is
Mhm.
messing with us. Clearly,
Oh
something
yeah.
is messing with us. And I don't know what God is. We use the term God, but everybody has its own interpretation, of course.
Mhm.
I, I I can trust it. I can trust this, whatever it is. I don't know what it wants from me. I don't know if it's messing with me. I don't know if I'm
Mhm.
doing everything right. I don't know if I'm doing wrong. I don't know why it's throwing all this shit at me, like these phenomena I don't understand. What does it
Mhm.
what does these phenomena want to tell us? And these phenomena, they get adapted to us too. We've talked about it before.
Yeah.
Wanted to
Mhm.
add that in the 80s and 90s, those phenomena were, let's stick to the UFOs for a second. Those
Yeah.
UFOs, those contacts, they were more esoteric in the 80s and 90s. So it
Yeah.
was about the message, and
Mhm.
it was Nordics, and there was humanoids with, yeah, long blonde hair and blue
Mhm.
eyes, and they
Yep.
talked about beautiful messages for mankind. and
Mhm.
and not entirely, of course. We had Bob Lazar
Yeah.
and stuff, and but we had Billy Meier and guys like
I
him.
was literally just thinking about Billy Meier. Yeah.
Yeah, let's talk about him for a second in a
Mhm.
minute. But then it became more technical. We've then it was
Mhm.
about the UFOs. It was about the phenomena itself. It was about propulsion systems. It was about the
Mhm.
phenomena itself. We didn't care about the the beings too much anymore. We
Yeah.
it was sometimes it was robots then, and it was, I don't know, it was
Mhm.
these emotionless gray aliens, and with no expression on their face, and
Yeah.
shoving probes in our butts and in our throats and in our noses and stuff like that. So it was not about the
Yeah.
esoteric message anymore. It was about, it was, we didn't know it was about, really. It was, they were there, and they
Mhm.
met us, and they shoved things in our noses, and stuff like that. But
Mhm.
it was more about the UFOs itself, and it yeah, it adapted to us, to our way of living, to how we
Yeah.
were thinking, how we were acting.
Mhm.
And that's strange, and this is what makes it very
Mhm.
strange to me.
So let's talk about Billy Meier for 2 seconds.
Yeah.
Because if we get into Bob Lazar, that's a whole different kettle of fish. I'll say this just to be spicy. I think he's a government agent, but that's a
What?
whole
What?
that's
What?
that's
What?
a
What?
whole
What?
that's a whole episode into itself. I would actually, you know what? If you can get a hold of Norio Hayakawa, um, I'll send you a thing for him. He'd
Yeah.
be the best person to talk to on that. I will just say, Norio Hayakawa. There is a so I opened the door. I should probably close it at least this much. He has there's a 30-minute documentary on just him, right? He's one of the he calls it it's called the conspiratologist, right? He's old school. Like he was there in the 80s doing this work, right? And he has a really interesting story about Bob Lazar. But let's put all that aside, where he's like, I'm trying to interview Bob Lazar, and there are these guys in suits there with him, right? Black SUVs out front, the whole 9 yards. But let me just ask one question about Bob Lazar. So Bob Lazar in the 80s and very early 90s, so late 80s, early 90s, he comes to fame because he's telling people, I worked at Area 51, and if you go to this one particular white mailbox at this time on these days, you can see them experimenting with the UFO technology, right? That's how that was his claim to fame. That was his way of saying, look, I'm legit, and that's what gave him his credibility, right? If Bob Lazar was who he claimed to be, and the government did not want these things to be resolved, why is he still sucking air? And why didn't they just change the dates of those flights? Because it's not like they didn't know they were there. They knew those people were there watching this thing happen. And they kept running it at the same time on the same days, knowing that, and they didn't bother to put somebody out there to keep them from seeing it. They eventually bought up a lot of that land, but it's like, why didn't they just, all they had to do was not do those test flights at that time. And he has no credibility. All they had to do was have some wet-work CIA agents show up at his house, overdose him. And this is the 80s, right? It's not today. 80s, early 90s. You dose him, you shoot him up full of some cocaine or heroin or whatever the drug du jour was at the time, maybe crack. You tell the cops he overdosed. Hell, they could have put a bullet in the back of his head and still said he overdosed. We've seen that happen with reporters. Where they, and Vince Foster shot twice. He killed himself by shooting himself twice in the back of the head. Like, this is not, and it's all ruled suicide. We've seen this happen. They could have just easily shot him full of heroin, and then tell the sheriff's agents he'd overdosed. They bring him out. Here's a title. Hey, crackpot UFO guy dies of heroin overdose. Story's over. And yet he is still sucking air. No, that doesn't make sense. But let's go back to Billy Meier for a second, because that's a really, yeah, no, okay, please go.
Just one thought, and I build a bridge to Billy Meier, I promise.
Yeah, no, go for it.
So I have my own thoughts on Bob Lazar, of course. A long time I was not sure about Billy Meier, about Bob Lazar. I thought it's just a guy with a strange story, and I don't know, didn't believe it, to be honest. But then there was Grush, and I thought, man, there's a few things that sound similar to what Bob Lazar said.
Oh yeah.
And I like the way he described working on the chip, how he described the details and stuff. But also, this could be made up. But then I heard him say, before all that happened, and before he worked in Area S4 and with the UFOs and shit, he wasn't interested in UFOs. He didn't care too much about UFOs and stuff. That's what he said. And then I saw the drawing he did of this UFO. And then I thought about Billy Meier's UFOs, because it looked very similar to one of the Billy Meier UFOs. And the pictures of Billy Meier and the story of Billy Meier was out long before Bob Lazar came up with the story, and he must have heard it. I thought, man, I'm sure he heard the story of Billy Meier, and if he made it up, this drawing was inspired by one of Billy Meier's UFOs that from the pictures, because it looked very similar to one of the Billy Meier UFOs. Yeah.
So just to be very clear on my stance on Lazar, I don't think he's making it up. I think he's working with what we would have called OSI at the time, right? Yeah. Because again, with Grush, great. Look at the people who are sitting behind Grush. Look at the people who are the law office that's working with Grush for his whistleblower testimony, right? This is the deep state. It's as swampy as it gets. These are the intelligence officer agents and their connections that they were using to manipulate. We know for a fact, this isn't even my opinion. Again, whether you like Trump or not, irrelevant to what I was about to say. There were so many things that came out during that time where it was where it's provable, where we know it was all fake, and that those are the same people who are involved. It's not that I have a personal thing against them. It says for over a decade now, it has been legal for our intelligence operations to do disinformation here and psychological warfare here. in this country to manipulate us. Now, I think it's kind of naive to think they weren't doing it before that. It's just legal to do it now, right? And here's the worst part. Grush could be legit, could be honest as the day is long. It doesn't mean he's not being manipulated, right? My the thing is, why if they were lying before, why are we assuming that they're lying now? Again, there's a lot of reason to think that a lot of the bigger names in ufology have been either directly manipulated by intelligence operations or themselves are operations, meaning that they are actively working with the United States government, and that's why they're there. That's why they got the headline time. That's why they got the good interviews, because that's what they were doing. That was their plan. That's what they're getting paid to do. And I mean, there's a lot of names you get into it. You don't have to dig very hard before you realize there's a lot of names that keep popping up, and you're like, that's very uncomfortable. But let's go back to Billy Meier, because you're right. A
Yeah.
lot of stuff touches back to Billy Meier. Let me ask one question about Billy Meier. And again, let's work from the assumption that he's being honest, meaning he is interacting with these entities, right? It doesn't mean those entities are being honest with him. But the number one red flag with these Nordics was the names that kept popping up. One of the entities he spoke with, his name named themselves Samyaza. That is literally the name of the lead watcher from Enoch. And I think it would be very easy to say, oh, he just pulled a lot of the stuff from the Book of Enoch. Well, okay, that's one theory, but it feels like a really bad idea if you're trying to perpetrate a hoax, right? Why pull a name from an obvious religious text? Except I don't think it was pulled from there by him. I don't think he knew anything about the Book of Enoch because it wasn't that popular at the time. It really has been sort of low key for decades. It's more of an academic thing until very, very recently. But I do think the entity has to tell him what its name is. Again, a lot of these things they tell us lies encased in truths. They have to tell you what their names are.
Wait. So
Mhm.
you're telling me he was in fact in contact with an entity? Maybe, of course, we don't know it.
Yeah, we don't
And
know.
he got uh he got the message somehow,
Mhm.
or
Yeah.
so yeah.
Yeah, again, working from the assumption that he's not making it up, that he's
Yeah.
being honest, right?
Okay.
Yeah, I think he was, and he was clearly interacting with something. But I think this thing had to tell him his name. And that's why it couldn't lie about the fact that his name was Semyaza. And that is absolutely the name that is given to the lead watcher that rebels in the Book of Enoch. That's one of the watchers that comes to Earth, exchanges technology for access to human women to create these hybrid Nephilim. And what is the whole point of Billy Meier's? What are the actions of Meier's, alien brethren? And of course, that whole thing is they're coming here to create hybrids because they need hybrids.
Would you say the Billy Meier thing is a cult?
I would suggest that what he interacted with was a cult. I don't know that he knew what he was interacting with.
Do you think that what he's doing can be
Oh,
considered
absolutely.
a cult?
Yeah,
But
same thing. And I'll throw Stephen Greer in that as well. I mean, what's the difference? The whole CE5, CE6 stuff. You're channeling information. You're going out into the desert and firing lasers in the sky while in a circle. What's the difference between that and going out into a field 1,000 years ago, lighting a bonfire and dancing around it? It's the same thing. It's just dressed up for the modern era.
do you think it's a negative kind of cult? I mean, he's
Yes, and
robbing nobody from his, so he's not taking. You're not going to Billy Meier's residence, and you don't have to give all your belongings and all your money. So it's not. You know what I mean?
cults. Yeah, no. So here's the thing. A The problem is we define things often by what they look like rather than what the higher purpose is, and that's kind of the problem, right? I Is he running a traditional cult like we had the Branch Davidians down here in Texas, 20 years ago or 30 years ago? I was here with I grown up here and lived here my whole life. I was there when that happened. I was here when that was going on. That would be a more traditional idea of a cult, right? You have a cult leader, people come that, he's manipulating them, he's getting sex and money out of them, property, that kind of thing. That's a overarching, that's what we view a cult as. The problem is that's not the only way cults exist. And the thing is, you can be sincere. You can be a seemingly good guy. You don't have to be manipulating or taking things away from people to have created a cult. Going back to the whole point about with C.S. Lewis in his commentary in the Screwtape Letters, where he's like, there's an argument. It's like, do you want your person to be educated or uneducated? His whole point is it doesn't matter one way or the other. The goal in my opinion, the goal of the demonic is not to make you as evil as possible. They don't care if you're out there strangling puppies and kicking kittens, right? Their only real job, the only thing they want is to keep you from God. And if they can put anything in that place, if they can put anything else there, then they've won. That's all they got to do. Now, some people, they're like, yeah, let's make you as evil as possible because they can. Some people are just not going to want to do that. But if they can put something else there, some other thing, then that's what they'll do. I would suggest a lot of people, a lot of demons have had a lot of good work in a lot of major churches here in the U.S. I would say a lot of these mega churches are absolutely cultish because they're keeping people from God, because they're putting something else there, right? It doesn't matter what it is, greed, lust, whatever. It just, as long as you're not actually with God, that's the only goal. The problem is, it doesn't matter if you go to hell and you've been rescuing kittens and giving, like, that's one way. The other way is you're drowning the kittens. It doesn't matter because you're still on the wrong path. That's it. That's all they got to do. Again, it goes back to the garden. The garden, if you're not constantly tending it, will kill those flowers. It doesn't matter if it's the insects or the rodents or the weeds. They'll find a way. That's all they got to do. And one of the things I have seen, and this is pretty universal, right? Whether it's people who are really into the they're like, yeah, no, I'm really communing with my UFO brothers and they care for me. Or if it's the people who, I know a lot of people, I care about these people who think that they're talking to Sasquatch, right? You watch their lives unravel around them. A lot of times you watch, and it's not that they're out doing evil things, but their lives, they're just not connecting with they're shrinking away from other people, their family members. They're not really getting, like, you can just tell, like, their lives are just off kilter and things are being destroyed around them slowly. Not that they're doing anything actively evil, not that they're hurting people, but things are happening around them that it just seems like they have an awful lot of bad luck a little too often, right? Sometimes these things happen over years or decades. Just like there's always that one guy who's like, I've done cocaine for years and everything's fine. Well, okay, fine. Maybe you make it through your 20s and 30s, and you're one of the few people who can, quote unquote, responsibly handle it, but they get to the 60s and their body's destroyed. And they end up spending all the wealth and everything they accumulate trying to put their bodies back together. That still destroyed you, right? It just may take longer. Not everything is immediate. But when I look at Billy Meier, I don't think he's a bad guy. I just don't think that the things that are talking to him are what they claim to be. But the fact that they had to use that one name should be a really major red flag.
It's not the only red flag for
No,
me.
it's not.
I've talked to Michael Horn a few
Mm-hmm.
times in this podcast. I'm sure you're familiar with Michael Horn.
Mm-hmm. Hmm.
Also not a bad guy. I really do like him. I had interesting talks with him. I
Hmm.
do not agree with most of the things he says, but
Hmm.
it's very interesting talking to him. He's an interesting person.
Hmm.
I like him. Um, and I made it clear that I'm not into the Billy Meier stuff, and
Yeah.
I'm and I will not be to it in the future. But
Yep.
yeah, doesn't say that doesn't mean that I don't accept him and what he's doing and what he stands for and what Billy Meier stands for. As long as nobody gets hurt, I'm absolutely cool with it. But yeah, we've got the Billy Meier UFO pictures, which are
Mhm.
somewhat hilarious to me. We know the infamous wedding cake UFO, which
Yeah.
is damn man, bro. You know, it's maybe those pictures was created to draw people in to
Hmm.
start with something because it's not about the UFOs. It's what this is what Michael says. This is what Billy Meyer says.
Yeah.
It's not about UFOs. It's about the spiritual message. It's about the message, and I get
Yeah.
that. It's not a bad message, to be honest. It's
Hmm.
about saving the planet and doing good and stuff, this and that. But then he talked about in his books. He talks about time travels and stuff. And there was these
Hmm.
photos of the dinosaurs,
Yeah.
and I was like, man, those pictures. And then they found these pictures in old history books or what
Hmm.
I don't know. I think it was an old history book, and I don't know, man.
Yeah.
I how can all this stuff create such a big bubble of people around
Hmm.
it? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
With
Hmm.
all these strange and obviously, let's call it fake
Hmm.
pictures. To me, this is my opinion.
Yes.
Don't throw shit at me, guys. I
Oh,
respect.
do it. No, do it anyway.
Yeah, do it anyway. Sometimes, yeah, I can live with it. But
Yeah.
with all these strange pictures and sometimes hilarious pictures
Hmm.
the dinosaur stuff and the reports about the time travel, how can this create such a big bubble around it? I never got that. I never got that.
So, real quick, on what is, again, like you said, the dinosaurs, my favorite part too.
Yeah,
Um, for obvious reasons, I'm a big dinosaur guy. For obvious reasons. Um, but um, what I have noticed is that people, again, working from the idea that he is sincere, just working from that assumption, right? I have seen very sincere people fake things because they want to have evidence for their sincerity. Does that make sense? Like
yeah,
it's like, well, these people are going to need proof. I am sincere in my belief, and so I'm going to create this stuff so that it'll give a chance, an excuse for people to believe me, right? And I mean, I've seen them again on my side, on people that I would normally agree, like we probably agree on the bulk of things, but then they'll do stuff, and I'm like, what are you doing? You don't need to do that, right? You're either manipulating something or you're straight up lying about something. Like that's what I'm out. If you have to lie to make your point, then your point's not worth making, right? That's my opinion. That's how I operate. But for them, they are true believers, right? So as far as why things shook out the way they did for Billy, that's my thought, right? He was a true believer. Now, as far as why is everyone else, again, you're like, I can get him buying into all this, but why everyone else? It's a trite saying nowadays, and it's very, very common, but there's there's an old saying that there's a God-shaped hole in everyone's life, and everyone tries to fill it with something. If you don't put God there, then, and this has been my experience, you're going to put something else in there, right? And people are looking for something to put in there. If you can give them that thing to put in there, what, again, some people put drugs, some people put money in there, some people put, you know, again, fill in the blank. People have put weird stuff in there. I think for a lot of people, that's Bigfoot, right? A lot of people put Fortiana in that hole, and that's because it is very clearly their religion. And with Billy Meier, as with any cult, right? Again, like I said, I don't think he's like a Branch Davidian cult, but like you see a lot of these cultists and you're like, what is going on? Why are you buying into this absurd story, right? Let's take Billy Meier out of it for just a second. But we've seen people buy into some just ridiculous things, right? Why? Because they need to put something there. There's something they're trying to put in that hole. That's why people were attracted to Billy Meier, because maybe it was the message. They're like, hey, I like the sound of this story, right? I like the sound of being that you've been chosen by the Space Brothers and to take care of the Earth, and these all sound like good things, right? But a lot of people fill it with politics. How often do people just believe, I mean, insane things? They're like, yeah, this politician is going to save us, and it's all going to be good, and they follow the most insane ideas. Why? Because they're trying to fill that hole with something other than what it was meant to. And so, it doesn't matter if you fill it with sports. And I mean, I'm here to tell you, man, I know people for whom fishing is their religion, right? I'm in Texas. Football is a freaking religion down here, right? And that's real football, not that European stuff. I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
Yeah, you
It's
don't
a
like
joke.
soccer, yeah, right?
Okay, so I actually played soccer growing up. Soccer is actually fairly large here in Texas. Again, we have a large Hispanic community, but it's not like football is football here in Texas, right? It's not soccer. Although soccer is getting bigger, and now we've got cricket
Oh,
things down here, and I'm like, how did we get cricket? I'm like, what? We fought a war, so we didn't have to have cricket. What's going on here? Um, but anyway, my point is you can fill that with anything, right? Again, sex, drugs, rock and roll, politics, sports, fishing, weird cults, comic
podcast,
books,
podcasting.
podcasting, dude, podcasting. Star Wars. You can't tell me that Star Wars and Star Trek's, I draw comics. I like comics.
Those are cults,
I,
definitely.
yeah, those are cults. Like straight up. I'm sorry, you learned Klingon? Like you learned a fictional language? Well, I speak English, and that's as good as I'm ever going to go. Trust me, I've tried. I can't learn other languages, but you learned a fictional language, like that's a cult, dude. But it's all the same. Like I love comics. I've gone to conventions for years. I've done things at conventions for years. But you look at some of these people, and you're like, this is all you have. It is a replacement for religion, right? It's that's so again, going back to your question, Billy Meier, did he start a cult? Yeah, a lot of this stuff is, right? It's not the Branch Davidian Jim Jones drink the Kool-Aid cult. It's just a cult in the sense that it's a replacement for religion, for a traditional religion. That's all it is, right? It is a way to fill that God-shaped hole in a way that just keeps that for whatever reason, that's what appeals to them, right? It's again no different. The people who are following Billy Meier, no different from the people who are following, again, Star Wars and Star Trek and football and all of that. Same thing.
You mentioned Jim Jones and the cult
Hmm.
and the fucked up stuff, man, but I never understood how. I mean, I know that this happens
Yeah.
around the world all the time. I know that,
All the time.
and I'm not stupid. I know that, but
Yeah.
for me, that would never be an option. Follow somebody, and when he tells me to drink that shit and kill myself because there's a spaceship
Hmm.
beaming me up, I would stay there, stand there, and say, what the fuck?
Yeah.
I should.
Yeah. We had the Heaven's Gate. We had the Heaven's Gate cult.
You
What,
want me
20
to
years
what?
ago?
Yeah,
Yeah. It's insane. So here's the thing, man. And I again, I mean this very sincerely because I've wondered the same thing, right? Constantly. It's because again, trying to do the gardening thing, right? Mentally, spiritually, it's like you always, it's like how, but you got to ask yourself that question, like how do you get to that point where you're like, yeah, I I need to kill myself so I can catch a ride on the Hale-Bopp comet, right? Like
yeah.
how do you get to that point?
How empty do you have to be? You're only a shell.
Mhm.
Yeah, and you can be filled with
Mhm.
so much bullshit, And
Hmm.
to this point, I never understood it. What does it tell you about the people that did it for him?
Oh yeah, no, it does. But this honestly, but also it's like, how do you get to that point in your life where you're leading people like that?
Yeah.
You got into this to help. This is why I go back to the idea of sudden acute possession and just the fact there are demons out there who are trying to get you to do things that aren't in your best interest. Because to a point, yeah, we don't need a lot of help doing bad things to each other, right? We're going to do that naturally. But it does seem like every once in a while someone shows up and does something, and a lot of people follow along, and you're like, what is happening here? How did you get to that point? Because there is something else out there
Do you think he was
that
convinced?
is. Oh yeah, I'm convinced that there's something else. Again, that's what the demons are doing. Sometimes they step in and they're like, you get to that point where you're just weak enough. You're just weak enough. That's that. Again, lions don't go for the strong prey; they go for the weak prey, right? So many things happen by inches. Going back to football, one other religion. Football's a game of inches in a lot of ways, right? And so much of it can make for boring gameplay sometimes, but if you're a team who knows how to just move the ball those 10 yards, right? It may not be exciting as a good long Hail Mary play, but it will get you that goal if you just move the ball down the field a little bit at a time. Oftentimes, these things aren't everything's fine, and then you're drinking Kool-Aid wearing sneakers, right? And of course, I said sneakers and not tennis shoes because sneakers are not the word I use. It's only because that's like for me, if you're wearing sneakers, something is wrong. Tennis shoes is what we wear in Texas. Um, but it's like it's because something's gone wrong, but it hasn't gone wrong like that. It's gone wrong a little bit at a time. People keep asking me, it's like, how has everything gotten so nuts? I'm like, because it got nuts 40 years ago. It's just gotten a little bit further down the road. Just a little. They just kept moving the ball a little bit and a little bit and a little bit. Um, in art, the term avant-garde popped up, and just it's the avant-garde. It's the front edge, right? You're pushing the envelope. Well, here's the problem. At a certain point, an envelope, if you keep pushing it, it's going to hit that tipping point where there's more mass off the table than on the table. It could take you a year to push that envelope, but once you get it to that one point, it falls off the table immediately. Demons are patient. They don't care what you're into. They just don't want you to be into certain things. And it doesn't matter what it is. They don't care if you kill yourself. They'd love it if you did, but they don't care. They don't care if you kill yourself slowly over, with responsible cocaine use. I only use that because I've known people. Or if it's just that you're just not paying attention to your kids, right? They don't care. They just want to move the ball down that field. Whether it takes them 5 years, 20 years, or 60 years, they don't care. The reason people, if you're struggling to, if you want to believe something, you need something to believe in, people will believe in some crazy things. But the reason they never wake up is because at some point they didn't weed that garden, right? I believe stupid things. I've thought crazy thoughts, but I kept weeding the garden. People talk about touching grass. Yeah, I love the idea of touching grass. But for me, that's a broader idea of what can you prove objectively? What can you look at and say, okay, this is an objective thing? Where I think a lot of us go wrong in this field is we allow what if we allow our speculation to replace objective reality. Like I can come up with a lot of theories for a lot of things. And the reason though I haven't is because I realized I don't have any real evidence for it. Right? Again, I'm over here saying I'd like to say it's all supernatural. I'm 30 seconds away from that. It would be really easy to say, look, all this Forteana stuff, it's all supernatural and walk away. But I can't. Why? Because I have evidence that doesn't necessarily match up with that hypothesis. So I would be irresponsible in saying that. My garden would not be weeded if I just threw all that away. But at the same time, I also realized, well, hold on, because I don't understand what this all is, where am I taking that step out in speculation? It's not an objective reality, right? Like I said, science can be reliable to a point. What does the data actually say? But then I realized, hold on, any conclusions I draw from that, what are the presuppositions? I admit my bias on the table, right? That's why I put the word biblical in there. I'm telling you what my bias is. Now, I think I've got an argument for why that bias exists, and I can make the argument for it, but it's a bias. In the same way, like I said, this is an art. All of this is all not between science and religion; it's between religion and religion. A lot of these things are just biases. Some people just want there to be little green men that are telling them the world is one way or the other, right? Some people want there to be a Sasquatch that says you're special and I want to talk to you and you alone, and I will never give you a picture of me, right? Because they want it to be real. They want to be special. In the same way that you meet these women when you're growing up and they're falling for these really bad guys and you're like, how can you not see this dude's a loser? And they're like, no, 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 he says I'm special. Right? It is the same thing. And again, same thing with guys. You're like, guys, like this woman's nuts. What are you doing? Right? It's like, no, no, no. She says I'm special. And of course she's banging 12 other guys on the side. And you try and you show them, and they're like, no, no, that's not real. She loves me.
Yeah.
Right? It's the same thing. If they can, as long as you find a way to say that you're special, but there's no, then you'll fall into that hole. Because if we're not weeding that garden, if we're not saying what is objective here, right? Objective is this guy being good to me or not? Is this woman being good to me or not? No. Okay, then I need to get out, right? It's not, hey, is this person telling me the truth or not? It doesn't, if you don't ask those questions, is this evidence real or not? Right? If you're not asking those questions, then you're going to go off in whatever direction makes you feel good. And the problem is, if it feels good all the time, then it's probably not right. Because I'll tell you, you know what? There's a lot of things that in my walk with God that I'm like, man, that doesn't feel good. It feels uncomfortable because it asks me to give up something that I like. But it's like, well, yeah, in the same way that I would tell my 4-year-old, they're all much, much older now. But it's like, yeah, you got to brush your teeth. You can't eat chocolate cake all the time. It's like, yeah, it doesn't feel good. I've been trying to lose weight. It doesn't feel good going to the gym. I don't understand those people who are like, yeah, I went for a 10-mile run and I feel awesome. I'm like, you shut your mouth. Like, no, going to the gym does not feel good at all. Eating right doesn't feel good. Right. But is it good for me? Yeah, it's objectively good for me. Right. Like, I don't understand those people who are like, yeah, I just did 10 miles and 5,000 reps and did sit-ups for 12 and a half hours. And I'm like, and they're like, I feel wonderful. I've got that. I'm like, well, I've never had a runner's high. At least not since I've been like a teenager. Like, what the heck? I'm like, I'd love to feel good running these things. Most of the time, I'm just like, why am I still alive? You know? But again, objectively, I know that that's what's good for me. Right? We need to be able to touch that again, that's why I care about the reality of scripture and the reality, both the archaeologically and what we can observe around us. Those things matter because if it's real, then it's not just, okay, cool, it's real. Then it means I need to live this way. It means that I need to be right with the being that says, hey, I love you. I want to spend eternity with you. Don't screw this up. Don't hurt other people. Don't take advantage of them. Care about them physically and emotionally, even if they don't like it. A friend of mine said something, and it's changed how I mean, well, I was already there, but it's sort of really cemented. He says, I'm not here to be my friend's or my kid's friend. So if they grow up to be successful, happy human beings and they hate me, then I've still done my job right. Because sometimes being the good guy means you have to be the bad guy.
Yeah. Fair enough. I have 2 or 3 more things that I want to talk about before we quit here.
Go for it.
Although we're already 2 hours in, man.
Yeah.
I hope you don't mind.
Oh, I don't mind. I'm good.
What is your interpretation of God? Since we talk a lot about God,
Mhm.
what is interpretation of God? What is God for you, and what do you think? Because people love to
Oh yeah.
talk about it. Where is God located? Where is God? Some people say he's all around us, he's everywhere in us, and this and that. Some say maybe God is in the water, in the blood cells. Maybe God is
Mhm.
dead already. That's what
Yeah.
philosophers said once. Um, what is God for you, and where do you think is God?
Actually, I think that's the same question. Um, so let me step beyond the normal scriptural truths that have become sort of platitudes in a way. Um, the way I read the Bible, I think it's very clear that the being that we call God is a triune entity that exists outside of our reality. Our reality is entirely dependent on him. He is an infinite and omniscient being. He is distinct from his creation, but is intimately intertwined with it in observation and concern. I once I realized why he calls him, like, he uses certain words to describe himself and time, that all he's trying to say is, I am not you. I am significantly different from you. Once I stopped trying to understand exactly what he is in a way that I can understand it, because I realized that's me just trying to make him small enough to fit in a box. So I'm not going to say, because any word I use is at best my understanding of our reality when we've already admitted we don't even know what the hell we are and what this place is, right? Like I barely understand. We barely understand what this pen is. You mean to tell me I can somehow wrap my brain around, and I'm a pre-existent, omniscient, all-powerful being that spoke the universe into creation, which means there was nothing. Like, he has to create this space for us to even exist in. I would suggest if he's literally what he claims to be, then when people have these visions of heaven, are they seeing God? I think they're seeing essentially as much of him that can exist in that reality without destroying it, right? In many ways, I like the simulation theory in so much as it's a really great metaphor for what the reality is, right? Like, super again, I've used Super Mario a couple times, the old 8-bit game, 2D side scroller, right? Mario could no more understand what we are than we can understand what God is. And the thing is, it's I don't need to understand what he is. I just need to understand that he is. Mario just needs to understand that we are. We're the players, right? We programmed his universe. However, we would interact with him would never be an accurate representation of our existence, nor could he understand it. I did not come up with this analogy, but it's a great one. I think it was the Imaginary Axis who came up with this one. I really, really love it. He said, imagine if you were to talk to Mario and say, why don't you just go around the pipes? Right? That word would have zero meaning to him. He couldn't comprehend the word around. In the same way that if a being from a higher dimensional plane were to come to us and say, why don't you just move septward? Sept means seven. That word would have no meaning to us. We couldn't even comprehend what that would even mean. You have so many people who have these near death experiences or visions of heaven, and they talk about seeing things three-dimensionally, where it's like, I'm seeing inside an object at the same time I'm seeing out of it, because I can't describe it. When they talk about heaven, they say, I'm seeing a realm that's more real than this place is. It's outside of our comprehension. Oftentimes our attempt to understand what God is again that attempt to take control over things, right? Because we think that if we understand it, then we own it and we know it. It's like, here's the problem. That's another illusion of control. I can't understand what he is. I just understand that he is. And that's as best as I'm ever going to do.
Yeah,
I can never move beyond that because I'm too small. I can't even really understand what's going on with this. By the way, it's my favorite pen in the whole world. It writes like crap, but it's got a level on it and a ruler and like a thing on it. I love this pen. but I can no more truly, but I can't even truly understand this. If I can't even really truly grasp how this works on a quantum level, how could I ever begin to dream about really understanding a being that powerful and that so far outside of my realm of existence? Mario can't understand us. We can't understand him, but we can understand what he wants, and we can understand that he is. And that's sufficient. Now, again, where is he? In a way, again, if he's omniscient, he is everywhere. He's not in a pen or in a water or in a thing, but he is there. And here's where it gets worse. I'll take it one step further. He is so alien to us. I think time doesn't exist for him. I think it's very clear that it doesn't. If we were to, again, one of those Schrodinger cat, thought experiments, right? If you had Adam, let's say we had a camera set up, and Adam, the first human, sitting down with God, and they're drinking coffee, right? And they're talking. And then you got, say, Julius Caesar having coffee with God, and they're all on, and then we're talking to him right now. And we can see on the cameras, and at one point, God reaches down, takes a cup of coffee, and takes a sip, right? And he does the same thing in our interview. I would submit that isn't God taking 3 different sips of 3 different sets of coffee. I don't even think he's taking 3 sips from the same cup of coffee. He's taking the same sip from the same cup of coffee in all 3 times. Time does not exist for him. It exists for us and probably even the supernatural beings that we interact with. He is so far outside of our realm of comprehension that nothing we could ever do could ever fully explain what he is. Which is why I have a lot of problems with a lot of theologies that are trying to, it's like, no, we've got God nailed down. We know what he did, we know what he is, and this is how he operates, and this is, it's like, no, that's a God that fits in your box. That's not the God of the Bible. God of the Bible doesn't give a damn about your box because he's too big to fit in it.
We live in crazy times to call God he, you know?
Well, except that's what he calls himself.
I know.
Yeah, I know, but okay. So actually, I'll go on that for just 2 quick seconds.
Maybe it's gender. You don't know.
Well, the thing is, he is not male; it's masculine. I think this is one of those things where, because again, God says, "I'm not a man that he's not human." He goes out of his way to say that I'm not human. But there's a reason why we are called, the church is called the bride of Christ.
Mm-hmm.
These are all metaphors. Because again, going back to the idea, why do these things keep changing their shape depending on us? It may, because in order for us to understand what we're dealing with, there has to be some sort of a context. It's masculine. God is masculine because he's the mover. He is the prime mover. He is the initiator of all of reality. It's that concept. It isn't a sexual gender the way we think of it. It is masculine.
Yeah.
And again, I would suggest that the creation was designed like, hey, this is how it was set up so that we could understand, again, enough about him. In the same way that we would have to try and interact with Mario in a way that he could understand, it's how we can understand him.
I'm not the first one coming up with this idea, but can you imagine our universe being one grape hanging on the grapevine with a lot of other grapes? You know what I'm talking about? Talking about multiverses, maybe. And can you imagine that God created one after the other? Let's say we're the first universe. Ours is the first universe he created. Let's imagine that. And then he left us behind and he went on to create the other grapes on the vine and doesn't care about us anymore. And we don't understand how all this was created and how all this was made, because it's all so beautiful and fantastic. And we look in the sky at night and we are blown away by what we see. I do. I am when I look in the sky, and we don't understand it. Therefore, there must be something out there watching over us, and we have to bow down. Uh, I don't know, man. I can't imagine him
Mhm.
being like that. He created this one grape, and then he disappeared, created all the other ones, and maybe he's still creating grapes somewhere. I don't know. He's busy,
Mhm.
and he's not taking care of us, and he does not care about us. Maybe it is like that. Maybe he created this place with all his wonders and all its fantastic things and all its phenomena.
Mhm.
So it's working like a video game, and it's, I don't know, playing like a, yeah, like a never-ending video game, and there's no need for him to be there and observe us and take care of
Mhm.
us because,
Yeah.
yeah, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, again, it's deism, right? It's that God created the cosmic clockmaker. He created the universe and then just stepped away from it.
Yeah.
Right. That's the basic idea behind deism.
Mhm.
Like you said, it's a very old idea. It's definitely not a new one.
Yeah.
Um, Regardless of whether or not there are multiverses or whatever. Oh, we can come back to that concept later. But the reason I can't go along with that one is, again, from a reality standpoint. He's been way too active in reality. He's intervened far too often for it to be that he's stepped away. And today's, we're recording on Easter Sunday, right? That's the prima facie evidence that he did not step away. Is Easter, is the resurrection of Christ, is what happened there, is what happened to the 12, are the miracles that occurred there. But I've seen in my own life times where it's like, and again, we can go throughout history and find all these times where weird things happen. You're like, this is not normal. This was not a normal orchestrated thing. Something supernatural has occurred to make this happen. So history works out the way it has. But in my own personal life and in the lives of people I know, where there are events that occur, and you're like, that's not a disinterested being. That's coincidence only takes things so far. I don't entirely disbelieve in coincidence, but at the same time, I'm also like, okay, that does, chalking that up to coincidence, begs credulity. It's very, very clear that there is an active hand in human history. People are saved. I've had one very specific story. These were two friends of mine. They were driving to school. This was like 20 plus years ago. They got into a wreck, and what happened was they were an 18 wheeler. They were stuck in traffic, right? They weren't going anywhere, but an 18 wheeler jumped the median and crushed their car. There was a block of concrete that went through, like they're both sitting in the front seat. There was a block of concrete that went through the windshield of the passenger side and out the passenger side window. Block of concrete like this big. We know because again, there was a little hole in the front windshield because they got the plating on them. She was unharmed. And the girl in the driver's seat, again, the thing came down, basically crushed the car. That the door wouldn't open. When the police got there, she was outside of the car. She doesn't remember getting out of the car. And they checked. There had been oil from this 18 wheeler all poured all over the where she was. There was no she was not she had no oil on her, and there was no oil on like her where her hand, like she'd crawled out the window or something. You would have seen it not just all over her, but you've seen her handprints all over. She was clean. There were no handprints anywhere. No one can explain how she got out of the car. We don't know how my other friend even survived because that concrete slab should have taken her head out. She didn't even she had like a few scrapes, but nothing like that. No explanation as to how she survived. No, they don't really remember the event. They just remember that it happened, and then all they know is it's over. They're both alive, completely unharmed. I was there. I mean, I wasn't there at the thing. I knew these people. I saw the car. I saw what happened. That's a reality. That's touching grass.
Yeah. But let me jump in here real quick.
Hmm.
It all, of course, it sounds very dramatic, and I'm very glad that your friends
Hmm.
got out okay, of course. But One day I slipped on my stairs here,
Hmm.
but I stopped at the next step and nothing happened, and I kept on walking. One could say, "Man, thanks God you didn't trip down all the way down the stairs
Hmm.
because you could have, yeah, broke your neck
Yeah.
and died." So it's not that dramatic, but in some way, not to belittle the story, of course, but in some way
Hmm.
it's the same. I could have fell down the stairs and died,
Yeah.
and or I slip on the ice outside in the winter time, and I land on my butt and I laugh because nothing happened, and it's
Hmm.
more funny than dangerous. But I could
Yeah.
have fell different and break my neck and or split my head open. But you know what I mean? Somehow it's the same. Of course, the one sounds more dramatic than the other, but
Yeah.
uh, the outcome is the same.
Well,
So
and actually, you've just proven my point, because you're right. It is the same outcome. Now, again, the story I told, the reason I told it is because it is very clear whatever occurred there was also supernatural. Their survival is clearly a supernatural event. Your question is, how do we know that God just didn't walk away? And again, I'm here to tell you that's the entire point of the Bible is he never did. He's been here. He's been working with us. He wants us to take responsibility for ourselves and the world around us. Christ being the ultimate example of his love for us. But that's my entire point. You're right. It's very easy to look at big dramatic events throughout human history or even the lives of ourselves and our friends where these big things happen. It's like, it's clear something supernatural occurred to prevent that evil thing from happening. But I'm here to tell you it's the small things. You're right. It is. I fell down. I was, I had my youngest son. I was literally carrying him. We were, and I think we were going down a couple, just a, not even a flight of stairs, right? Just one of those at a mall things. I slipped, fell forward. My wife said, "You just turned in midair." And again, I was a lot lighter back then. I had a misspent youth in mixed martial arts. That's all I ever chalked it up to. But I was fine. The child was fine. We were fine, right? There's a thousand things. If we really were looking, it's like, yeah, you slipped on the ice and you didn't crack your head open. You slipped, but you caught yourself. You don't know how many thousands of times your life could have taken a very, very different take because something didn't occur.
yeah,
It's very easy to look again at the big things, but my point is the big things just prove that the little things are there too. And you sometimes you get that feeling, you're like, man, I didn't crack my head open. And you're like, why didn't I? Again, not a big thing, but it's like that could have turned out very differently. We've all been driving and you didn't quite pay as close enough attention as you should have, and something went a little different, but you're like, whoa, wow, I'm safe. Right? Literally happened to me this last week. I was doing everything fine. Dude pulled out in front of me and I mean, missed me by inches. He just didn't even care that I was there. Dude missed me by inches. And it's like a fraction of a second sooner of accelerating. If I accelerated differently, I would have gone off literally off a bridge because this guy just didn't care. I was hit at 75 miles an hour, and this happened years ago. Car flipped over. I mean, I'm not kidding when I say 75 miles an hour, hit from behind. I flip. I'm in a, I get out. I'm perfectly fine. The thing is, had I not been there, this dude, when he lost control of his car, would have gone into an embankment if he hadn't hit me. Him hitting my car redirected his car, and so it went straight. That dude's dead if he doesn't hit my car. But I'm fine. He was fine. I think God's far. It isn't just that that he hasn't walked away. I think he's far more intimate in our reality than we realize. I think he's right there every second watching over us. That's what the angels are for. He does care. He cares more than we realize. But but we have responsibilities to ourselves, and there are and he's set up the universe to be a certain way. It's never going to be easy because we screwed it up, but he is there and he's giving us weight. There are times you read you learn, there are friends and people that maybe secondarily that you're like, man, how are these people surviving? They're off doing drugs and they're getting all these things, and you're like, these people should have been dead a decade ago, right? Because they're living like hell. And it's like, and then eventually at some point their lives do turn around. Sometimes they don't. And it's like you can almost tell when God's like, there are headlines I won't say because they're kind of dramatic, but it's like God's like, okay, and you're done, and something just happens, right? But you see these times where it's not just good people who are saved. Sometimes God is saving bad people because He's trying to give them time. He wants to give us all as much time as possible, and sometimes the good people go because He doesn't want them ruined by this world. Not only do I not think that He walked away, I think He's far more intimate with our reality than we realize. He cares about us far more than we recognize. Because if we actually, I think if we actually saw His hand in our lives, it would terrify us how dependent we are on Him.
Do you think God has given us too much freedom when it comes to decisions? Do you think God would approve a death sentence?
I think God has given us as much. I think so. This is a great moral question that that people have never fully answered, and I don't know that it's capable for us to answer. But the theory goes like this: if we have free will, it may in the evil that we do with that free will may still be preferable to a world without free will. Asking questions means because God said He made us in His likeness. That doesn't mean we look like Him. It means we're supposed to be His representatives on earth. We are supposed to we are supposed to wrestle with these realities. We are to wrestle with it. The fact that we can ask these questions is far preferable. I love how people are like, I hate that God tells me what to do, but why did God give me all this free will to make decisions for myself, right? Well, which one do you want to be? Do you want to be an automaton that has no free will? Or do you want to or you want to be a being with free will, but then has the moral obligation to make choices? The simple fact of the matter is, there is no reason to think that that having free will is a zero sum game. The problem is it's uncomfortable having free will. That's the real issue for us. Is it's uncomfortable because we have to make decisions. And sometimes those decisions are hard. Oftentimes it's because we put ourselves in those situations, right? It's like, well, life never actually gives you lemons because lemons are crossbred. They're man-made, right? Life never actually gives you lemons. We do because of our choices. Now, the problem is we can choose to do good things. We can choose to do bad things. We live in an imperfect world right now because we broke the program. He gave us a perfect place to live, and we decided to screw it up. And so we have to deal with that. He's gonna fix it. And so those questions of capital punishment or no capital punishment or whatever, those are going to be taken. Those are going to be set aside eventually because it will be back to being a perfect world where people are who understand why it's important to do the right thing are going to be the people living in it. But for right now, we have to deal with the consequences of the fact that we broke the program. And that requires free will. Whether it was, ultimately, this is the one time you just say, I don't know. Was it good or bad? I'm going to take it as good because he did it. And ultimately, it's irrelevant because I can't judge him. I don't have a right to judge him. He's too big. I'm too dependent on my entire existence is too dependent on him to judge that. We have a hard enough time deciding. Again, I'm killing plants out here trying to garden. I can't even garden correctly. I'm supposed to judge the creator of the universe that can see through all of time and space and knows what if it's way worse than we realize? It's not even that what if there is just the one grape, but there's also a million grapes? It's all the same thing, right? There's one grape at the end, but essentially you have this whole long list of grapes and essentially just keeps congealing into the one grape. So he's not just existing or he doesn't just see our reality, he sees all the possible realities. And he's making certain that the grape that happens at the end is the best possible grape. So the problem is, do we have too much free will? Well, he doesn't seem to think so. I can't say that we do then. All I know is we have it. We'd better make the best use of it that we can.
You said God created us in his own image, I think.
Mm-hmm.
was the term he used.
Yeah.
I don't know if God said it. People wrote it down in the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
But why do we take their word? The Bible is a book full of stories that people wrote. People
Yeah.
wrote the Bible. Not God wrote the Bible. People wrote the Bible. And yet we, not me, but a lot of people live by the Bible. Take 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 the word of all these people who wrote the Bible, the stories of the Bible, and you know, here's my problem. If a whistleblower comes and says, "Hey, I have information about aliens," there's a few people that believe it, and but most of the people do not believe what he says
Mm-hmm.
because it's just something he said. There's no proof. So
Yeah.
I don't I don't see the real proof in the Bible. And I do to
Yeah. I get
add
what you're
that
saying.
to add that
Mm-hmm.
um I don't hate on the Bible. I don't hate on uh people who believe in God. I do believe in something too. And somehow I do pray too. I think I pray different. I'm not going down on my knees and fold my hands and pray, but I of course I'm sending out thoughts and energy out there to the universe. I don't know
Mm-hmm.
where. And my wishes, of course, because I also have wishes and desires. I'm a human being and I wish other people good. So I'm praying somehow too. But I have have problems with the church, to be honest, because
Mm-hmm.
I don't think you need the church to believe in God. You don't have to go to church and put your money there and you know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? You have to you can believe in God for yourself. You can stay at home and believe in God. You don't have to church and belief and God doesn't go together that well in my opinion. This is my opinion and I don't know. The Bible, like I said, is a book
Mm-hmm.
that's one wrote, not it wasn't brought here. It didn't just disappear. The Bible just didn't just appear and there it was on
Mm-hmm.
somewhere on the floor and nobody knew where it came from. It was a book written by people. So, and though people say when I talk about aliens all the time in my podcast, talk about paranormal phenomena,
Mm-hmm.
ghost stuff, and those cryptids, just like you.
Yeah.
And people say, "Oh, I don't believe there are aliens out there. I don't believe in there's aliens in other planets, multiverses, or that's some bullshit." Uh, uh, Bigfoot and cryptid beings. No, I don't believe in that. But and I say, oh, but you believe there was a guy walking on water and feeding people
Mm-hmm.
with a few fishes and wine and stuff, and somebody
Mm-hmm.
parted the sea and people walked through. These are the
Yeah.
stories you believe, but you don't. You cannot imagine a
Mm-hmm.
planet, one of these millions, trillions of planets that there's
Yeah.
life. So that's that's strange to me.
Yeah.
That's strange.
Let me agree with you. In fact, this is a question that I've asked a lot of people on who are in the church, right? I said, so let me get this straight. You believe that a supernatural being supernaturally created the universe full of other supernatural beings, supernaturally intends all things, sent his son supernaturally to live, die for your sins, resurrect on the third day, ascend bodily into heaven, and gave supernatural power to his followers to cast out other supernatural beings. You believe all this, right? And they said yes. I'm like, great, but you don't believe in the supernatural? Because you try and talk about the supernatural day, they're like, I don't think that's real. I don't think it's like, okay. So then my question is, do you really believe the book? So back to your question. So let me say, I am starting with a very similar position to you, in a way, right? Again, this is why I go back to. It's why I call myself a biblical paranormal researcher because I think these things are actually evidence that this is the story of reality. That this is trying to tell us what we are, where we are, what this reality is, as close as anyone's ever going to get to it. And again, we don't even understand what this reality is. This reality may be far more artificial than we realize. It may be far more dependent on our views about reality than we realize. But let's go back to, well, who wrote the Bible? Here's the thing. It wouldn't have mattered if a bunch of angels brought it down and dropped it on, somewhere. You'd have the same question. How do I know those angels were real? It's, people say, well, but the Bible was written by humans. Yeah. Well, who else was going to write it? It wasn't going to be giraffes. We were the ones that were created to be God's representatives on earth. This is our world to inhabit, to be stewards of. This is where we're supposed to live. We're the ones who are responsible for ourselves.
But sorry to interrupt you, but
Yeah.
can we agree that he would have the power to send some angels down there with the Bible in hand and give it to us, or maybe
Yeah.
a UFO landing on,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, a football field, as people say, and
Mm-hmm.
it's the Bible. He could have,
Well,
but he
he
didn't.
could have. Well, hold on, but he did. That's literally Jesus. He was God on earth. He raised the dead. He healed the sick. He created food out of nothing. And yet people still looked at it and said, yeah, I don't buy it. The problem isn't evidence. Again, going back to the idea of science versus religion, it's not science versus religion, it's religion versus religion. We all have in that God-shaped hole. The problem is a lot of people don't want to put God in that God-shaped hole. It is a choice. We are actively opposed to God in many ways. That's why we sin. That's why we naturally do things that are evil. We don't have to be taught to be selfish. We are naturally selfish. Have kids, you'll find that out real quick. The simple fact of the matter is the fact that humans wrote it in many ways actually improves the authenticity of it, because we can actually go through and watch it. Scholars for thousands of years have gone through all the different versions. We've looked at it. If it was just one thing in one building, someone could have come along and said, I'm going to make changes to this thing, or I'm going to lie to you about what's in it. The fact that we have over 5,000 manuscripts of books from the New Testament, all within a century or two or three on some of them of the original writings, allows us to say, yeah, we know what this text was. Even Bart Ehrman, who's not a Christian, will say, yeah, we basically know what was written in the New Testament because there's so many copies. The thing is, it wouldn't matter. Jesus came back from the dead. 500 people saw him. People saw the tomb was empty. They still didn't believe him. We're humans. We suck. We do stupid things all the time. We refuse to believe things that are happening in front of us. We just had that conversation. How many times do we know our friends? We're like, why are you with him? Why are you with her? These are terrible human beings. They just beat the crap out of you, and you're still with him. She just slept with 12 guys, and you're still with her right there in front of their faces. They're like, no, 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 he loves me. No, 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 she still loves me. Hey, I'm Jim Jones. Here's a bunch of people who've died drinking this Kool-Aid. You're going to drink more of it. Yep, sure, I'm going to do it. It wouldn't matter because he has. With Moses, he blotted out this, again, with the Egyptians, blotted out the sun, sent all these plagues, and they're still like, yeah, no, we're not letting y'all go. It doesn't matter. In fact, oftentimes, him showing up physically and doing things just makes us do stupid things. The entire Bible is full of people who saw just the greatest miracles of all time in God, and they're like, yeah, quick, let's go worship a golden calf. The entire Bible is full of humans doing stupid crap because it ultimately wouldn't matter. But it's also meaning that he wants us to participate in this thing. He doesn't want automatons. It goes back to the question of free will. He wants us to be free. He wants us to be responsible for ourselves. He wants us to take up the mantle of what he called us to be. And that does mean working with one another. It wouldn't matter if there was a giant person in the sky. People wouldn't believe it anyway. But you know what has changed more lives than anything else? That one person who goes to the gutters of Calcutta to rescue children. The people who fought to end slavery, a thing that has existed throughout all of humanity. The people who go to entirely foreign cultures that don't know them and don't owe them anything. They set up schools and hospitals. The best existence of God isn't necessarily artifacts like the London hammer that I have a replica of right here. It isn't the fact that there's the supernatural, or that you can use, or that Christian exorcism techniques end uh, alien and UFO abductions. None of that is the ultimate truth of it. It won't matter. The thing that ultimately ends up changing lives is when we can see in ourselves and in the lives of others around us that, hey, there is somebody who cares. They can see the change in them, because we are ourselves supernatural beings. We're not just flesh. We're not this pen, right? I'm more than just this thing. I am a supernatural being. You're a supernatural being. We're all supernatural beings within this flesh. And we can see the changes in people. We can see them sacrifice to help other people. That's the greatest gospel that will ever be written. It was written and preserved so that we have something objective to look at, because that's our responsibility to him. And he's superintended all of these things. And we can go, and again, there's 1,000 scholars you can call right now, and they will come up here and they will spend hours upon hours upon hours showing that the text is accurate. But it wouldn't matter. In fact, it's even better that we don't have the one perfect text, because that could be changed or lied about. We have it everywhere. It was the most decentralized truth of anything that any human's ever seen, because you couldn't change them all. We know what was written. The problem isn't that we don't know what was written. The problem is we don't want to believe it, because it's so hard to because it is so hard to believe that a God like that could even bother to care about us. Again, Jesus raised from the dead. He performed these miracles in broad daylight, and people still were like, yeah, whatever. Even the people he fed, they watched it happen. They left because he's like, okay, cool. You came back for food, but I'm going to tell you something true. They left because of that. By the time Jesus was done and he ascended, he only had 100+ followers that were there praying in Jerusalem. It didn't matter how many people saw it. It didn't matter the miracles. They didn't buy it. I have personally seen people in the middle, and they're like, man, this is the most amazing thing I've ever seen in my life. This is clearly a miracle, but I don't buy it. Again, I've got a replica of a hammer right here. It's right there in Glenrose. You can drive down. Well, you can't, because that would be a long drive for you. But you can go. It is proven. This is supposed to be 200+ million year old rock that was found. This was found in literally London, Texas. This hammer will not rust because it's a ferric oxide coating. So, okay, this is evidence right here. Something unique has happened. People say, no, it's not real. They say it's a forgery or a fraud. They won't say how it was forged or fraud. They won't say how they tricked it, or how. It's like, we know where this thing came from. We know the rock that it's in. They don't care. We have dinosaur bones with active hemoglobin and active biological material, and it's like, yeah, that means it can't be 65 million years. No, it's still 70 and 120 million years old. There's just something that's magically keeping it from deteriorating, even though we know for a fact organic material can't last 1 million years under perfect conditions. They know it. They can see it. It doesn't matter. Why didn't God just come down and drop it? Because then that's taking it away from us. And in many times, us not knowing things probably has saved us a lot. Our ability to be redeemed is because we were deceived. I know people who've fallen away from the faith, and they are the most bitter, hurtful, hateful people I've ever met. There's the difference between backsliding, right, and having, like, I've had moments with God where I'm like, I don't think I really enjoy what's going on here. I don't know what's going on. There's a difference between questioning. You're supposed to. Israel means wrestling with God. You're supposed to wrestle with God. You're supposed to have doubts. You're supposed to question. You're supposed to work this out. Isaiah says, let us reason one to another. He doesn't want robots. But I have seen what happens when people say, when they've seen the goodness of God, they've seen it in their lives, and they're like, you know what? I'm out. That's reject, and it is a bitterness because they've seen it for themselves. They know. And the problem is, if you know, then you're responsible for it. If there's at least I'm not sure what's going on here, then you're not necessarily responsible for that. You're just trying to work it out. There's some freedom there. He gave us free will, but that also means he gave us some freedom and he gave us some wiggle room to try and figure things out because he's trying to work it out with us in a way that doesn't call you to to immediate to an immediate announcement. Imagine, I mean, we've all had jobs, right? If you make a mistake, your boss is willing to forgive you most of the time, right? Unless you're a real jerk. But if you sat there, looked at your boss and said, "Hey, you know what? I don't like you. I think you suck, and I'm not going to do this thing you told me to do." You're fired because you did it to his face. It wasn't out of ignorance or you made a mistake. It was, I knew what I was supposed to do. I was explicitly told it, and I decided not to do it. God's keeping us from being in that situation. That's why Satan can't be saved, because he knew what was going on. He knew the deal. He spat in God's face directly. That's why that's going on. We, by not coming down and doing that directly, by giving us a little bit of ambiguity, is buying us time, because he doesn't want us to fall, but he also doesn't want to supersede our free will. Because if it's not free will, then it's not love. It's an automaton. And we go back to, but free will is a good thing on some level.
I have my doubts. That's because I'm still stuck in the nuts and bolts spiral, you know. I'm a nuts and bolts guy. I'm I like to talk about UFOs and stuff. And I just, yeah, not too long had to learn that it's not all about nuts and bolts. It's
Yep.
not always UFOs coming down. You can knock on them and door
Yep.
opens and the humanoid being gets out and shakes your hand. It's not about that. I had to learn that. Had to learn it over time, over the years, that it's not all about that. UFOs are way more than nuts and bolts and physical objects.
Yep.
But still, I'm stuck in that spiral a little bit, and little, and I'm, yeah, somewhat wrestling with the spiritual aspect of all these things. And when it comes to the Bible, I always, maybe I'm crazy for that, but sometimes I question, I ask myself, so the Bible is a book with a lot of stories in it that nobody can really prove. I mean, of course, if somebody says he can prove it for himself, that's okay. I'm cool with that, but I'm not that kind. But then I think, yeah, Billy Meier also wrote books. L. Ron Hubbard wrote books. There's a satanic Bible, so there's also books with messages that you can live after, but and nobody can prove if things in there are wrong or right. Nobody can prove. Nobody can really prove. Of course, we have doubts when we look at Billy Meier's pictures, when we listen to his stories, and you said, "Hey, there's some red flags," and we talked about the red flags.
Yeah.
Can we prove that that he's that he's not right? No, we cannot prove it. He could be completely right, and we live in our life entirely wrong.
No,
Same with the
100%.
Bible.
Well, and so this is there's 2 points. I'll jump to let me do the first one, because the second one is sort of the closer on that argument. No historical event can be proven scientifically. The nature of history is and people say, well, hold on, no, you can't prove it. You can just prove that an event occurred in a location at a time. And that's only certain ones, right? We don't actually know. Most historical events we can't prove one way or the other, right? We can prove certain civilizations existed, but any of the documents we just don't know. You can't prove that, right? So the question, as far as proof goes, is, well, there's aspects of things that can be proven archaeologically, but that doesn't mean that what was actually written down is true, right? Like, we can prove that there was an Israel, that the history of the nation of Israel occurred in the Levant. Like, we can prove that. We can prove that there are certain kings and emperors and events clearly took place, because we have other documents, other events. But again, fundamentally, it's history. We can't prove that those events themselves occurred. So the question then becomes sort of in the long term, because you're right. Lots of people have written lots of books. And this is why I go back to the power of the change in life. What message has done and what philosophies have done the best for humanity as a whole? We living in the 21st century do not fully, we just can't even wrap our minds around what life was like 2,000 years ago, what the Roman Empire really was like. Every hero, I mean, most of us really don't even have a real historical understanding of anything. It's what did Green Day say? Reruns have become our history. Even 100 years ago, most of us, the Wild West, most of us envision things the way we see it in movies and television shows, not the way it really, really was. We do not comprehend the impact for good that Christianity has had, and that the Judeo-Christian texts have had on the development of civilization. We can't possibly understand that. And we often don't even talk about the evils of these other philosophies that have evolved. In the 20th century alone, we've seen what's happened all over the world with a lot of these different things, the hundreds of millions of people who have died. And that's just a handful of things. It's very trite for people in popular people say, oh, but look at all the wars fought over religion. Well, guess what, Buttercup? Most people haven't even looked at the actual numbers. They don't know the actual numbers. In fact, the number of actual wars fought over religion are very, very low. Most wars are fought over resources. It's my people want that and you've got it. That's all war is for the vast majority of human history. We don't need religion to go to war. The simple fact of the matter is what has brought the most peace, what has brought the most prosperity, what has actually advanced human rights. And it is very clearly the Judeo-Christian, even societies that just, I would argue, don't even really get it right. I'd argue America hasn't gotten it right at all. But I can see the few people who've actually at least tried to do something along those lines have been the most prosperous. They've brought the most peace. They've brought schools and hospitals and orphanages to people where those things weren't even a concept. And then, but again, it goes back to none of that's actual, like it's not the definitive proof, right? It's not the prima facie evidence. It's not the murder weapon, so to speak, right? You're right. It's not. That's why point two is ultimately all things are taken on faith. People choose to believe Billy C. Meier. They choose to believe government schools. They choose to believe the Bible. They choose to believe anyone. They choose to not believe somebody. It's ultimately a choice. Because at the end of the day, just like we can't prove any historical event actually took place, all we can kind of do is see what the evidence is and make our own decision. That's all of life. That's everything. I can't prove I can't prove my wife loves me. I can just look at the evidence and say, I think she does. And I made that choice. In the same way, she can look and say she's got no real proof that I love her. But she can look at the evidence and make a decision and make that choice. And ultimately, all of these things are examples of faith. If you choose to believe in Darwinian evolution, atheistic evolution, that's an act of faith. I don't have that much faith, by the way, but that's fine. You can have but that's still an act of faith because you can't prove that any more than I can prove my position. We can just look at the evidence that exists. I can't prove Billy Meier is not actually talking to a bunch of extraterrestrials, right? I can't prove it beyond the shadow of a doubt. I can look at the evidence and just say, hey, I got some issues here. I got some red flags that makes me ask some questions. But my choice to agree with him or not, to believe him or not, is still an act of faith. Just like everyone who believes him, that's an act of their faith. The world may be far more complicated than we want it to be. In fact, I'm fairly certain that it is. Our reality may be something that is so different from what we're imagining it right now that we don't even have a language for it. You go back 600 years and you try to tell people that the reason they get sick is because they're little creatures so small you can't see it, and they get into you and they make you sick. They couldn't comprehend it because the microscope hadn't even been invented.
Right.
Most of our most right now we're disproving dark matter right now, right? We don't even understand how this universe works at all. Going back to one of the fundamental themes of this episode, we don't understand this universe at all. It may be far more weird than we give it credit for. Ultimately, faith is all we have. Because even the act of science, to believe that the universe is consistent enough to be observed and understood at any level, is an act of faith. It's all an act of faith. It's all an act of choice. Now, you can make the best decision that you got with the information that you have. And again, I go back to, I think maybe God gave us a lot of ambiguity so that we can have a little bit of wiggle room. He just wants us to do the best with what we have. And so, yeah, have I made a choice? Yeah. Do I lay my biases on the table? Yeah. Do I have reasons for my conclusions? Yes. But is it an act of faith? 100%. Can I prove it? No. Just like I can't prove any historical event happened. I can't prove that Jesus rose from the dead. I can show evidence that he did, but I can't prove it any more than I can prove any historical event. I can just come to the conclusion for all the reasons that I've given today that it did, that God does care. Even I'll be the first one to say, even, very recently, I'm like, I ask myself, does God really care? Right? Is he actually as involved as I want him to be, as I think that he is? I wrestle with that all the time because it's very easy to wrestle with, because it is kind of hard to believe that. But I do believe my wife loves me, right? And sometimes God shows you a little bit and he's like, hey, you know better than this. You know I'm here. You know I'm involved in the small things. The problem is we think he's not involved because he doesn't do the things we want him to do. We have ambiguity. That's life. Humans wrote the book. Who else was going to write it? All I can do is the best I have with what I have. And I just hope that somewhere along the line, it matters. I look at it and say, balance of evidence here there is a God. He did oversee the writing of the Bible. Are there questions about it? How to read it? What does it mean? Yeah, there's a ton of ambiguity, and that ambiguity is probably there for us to wrestle with it so that we become better people. Because it's not a rule book of do this and don't do that. Because he wants us to be more than that. He wants us to be more. He wants us to be profound, because we are profound. We are immortal beings. We are supernatural beings. We're not just this. We are more than that. Well, does that mean we have a higher responsibility then to try to be within this universe that may be a lot more weird than we want it to be? Oftentimes the problems that we have is because we we want things to be simple. We don't want to live up to our actual potential. That's the fear that I have, is that I know for a fact I haven't lived up to my potential. I don't think any of us have. I think God's like, do y'all understood? It's like, I think he's up there every day going, why don't you just do you better than you've ever done it before? You're smarter and braver and more powerful than you realize. If you would just stand up and do it, you'd fix all these things. We are afraid of our own power and our own inborn divine spark that he gave to every human being, because we are made in his likeness. But even that's an act of faith. People have changed the world because of that divine spark. They've made the world better for everyone because of that divine spark. And there's so few of us who are willing to do it, but them making those decisions to save slavery, or to save slaves, to fight the evils in this world, to give up their lives to save children from malaria. Those things were acts of faith, and they have paid off pretty well. So yeah, it's an act of faith.
You gave me a lot to think about tonight, man. A lot of interesting, lot of interesting thoughts. And you're right. Sometimes people are afraid and don't live up to their full potential. I think there's only a handful of people out there who lived up to their full potential. But as someone said, behind your biggest fears lies your biggest potential. So,
Yes.
and I try to live by that. It's not always easy. But
Nothing ever worth it is.
yes, that's true. I think we should come to an end because we're, yeah, reached the
Yeah, it's
3 hour
probably
mark.
midnight where you are. So
Yeah,
yeah.
it's 5 minutes to midnight. But I can let you go without telling me the story that we wanted to open the show with.
I'll tell it real quick. And by
Yeah,
the way, the story is in Metroplex Monsters, Dallas Demons, Fort Worth Goatmen, and Other Terrors of the Trinity
yeah.
River. Available wherever fine books and
I will put links in the description, guys.
yeah, there you go. But I'll give you the real quick version of it. 1992, I'm fishing in a creek in with a friend of mine. Again, I grew up just south of Dallas, right? This is the creek's very, very deep, right? Because all of North Texas sits on a limestone slab. And so the larger creeks they cut real deep into it, and really the tall trees and brush really are only around the creeks because that's where the water is. Again, it's North Texas. Water doesn't exist here naturally. Um, but again, we were packing up. It's about 11 o'clock. He was already up the embankment on the other side of the trees. I heard this call that I've never heard before. Again, child of the 80s. We spent all of our times outside. So I'm thinking, well, what the heck is this sound? Right? I haven't, it was clearly like an animal, but I was like, what the heck is this? I had already packed up my stuff. I was just up the sort of the embankment. I had just made it into the tree line. I poked my head out, and at first I see what I think is the biggest blue heron I've ever seen in my life. Because remember, this creek is like 15 feet in below before ground below ground level. So I'm about halfway up, and this thing comes around, and again, it looks like a blue heron to me, right? It's because it's Payne's gray, which is a bluish gray. I think I see its legs sticking out behind it, and it sort of has that look of a heron, right? Until it gets right in front of me. So I'm in the straightaway. So again, the creek kind of snakes through several cities and attaches to the Trinity River. But I'm like halfway in the middle of this little straightaway, and it gets right in front of my face. Its right wingtip is like 5 feet from me. That's how close this thing was. And it's at that moment I realize what I am seeing doesn't have feathers. And what I thought was the legs sticking out behind it was actually a tail with a flange on the end of it. And I watch it as it flies through and then just banks and turns to follow the creek and disappears. And that's it. So here's the thing. I didn't believe me. It's like I didn't believe my own sighting. I tried to write it off for years. Let me tell you how crazy this is. I think it was like another year or two later, I heard about the Texas pterosaurs that had been seen in the 70s, but that was so far south of me. Again, Texas is really, really big. Um, I was like, well, that's the Rio Grande Valley. That has nothing to do with us. That's too far away for these sightings. I had even written a booklet like way, way later proving that trying to show through art history that these ramphoractoid pterosaurs, because again, most people think of a pteranodon, right? The ones with the crest and no tail. There was a smaller subspecies that were called ramphoractoids. They typically did not have crests that we know of. They had teeth. They did not have bills or beaks the way a pteranodon does, and they had long tails with flanges on the end. I used art history to show that these ramphoractoids have been around and are the origin for like the wyvern, right, in heraldic art. I'm not kidding when I say this. I'm going to pull this up. Where'd it go? I had known Ken Gerhardt, the man who literally wrote Big Bird, the story of pterosaur, the story of modern sightings of flying monsters. This is about pterosaurs in the state of Texas. He has a ramphoractoid pterosaur on the cover I knew this man for years before I told him my story because I still didn't believe me. So again, I ain't the brightest. I am clearly not the brightest bulb in the drawer here. But long story short, I came to find out there were other people who had seen the same thing here in North Texas and southern Oklahoma. And that sort of set me on my more public quest of cryptozoology and Forteana. And I'd been in the field, I'd been in the realm for a while. Like I said, I'd done some other work. Mostly it was all artwork, but I mean, I've been around for a long time. And then it was really once I understood that, yeah, I'm not the only one who's seen this thing. And I did actually see it. It isn't some sort of thing that came up in my head. Um, that I embarked on my more public life as this. I didn't want to be the crazy person who saw a pterosaur, right? I want to draw comics and, raise my kids. I don't care. I don't want to be that guy. But I ultimately got put in this situation and I'm like, well, I better deal with this and I need to address this. There are living dinosaurs. There are, again, I know people, there's a keyboard warrior out there going, pterosaurs aren't dinosaurs. They're not dinosaurs. They're flying reptiles. So but we call them, most people associate them with dinosaurs, right?
Mhm.
A pterosaur is not a dinosaur. It is a flying reptile, but they are associated with it. However, that's not the only living dinosaur that seems to be kicking around, right? We got Mokilium Bembe, and then there's another one that looks like a ceratopsian whose name I cannot pronounce to save my life. Um, but yeah, we have living dinosaurs. And I realized I had a perspective because of what I had been through. It was amazing. Once I came out and said, okay, this is what I saw. I'm going to work on a book on the things here in North Texas. Cause my problem was I couldn't believe that it happened here. I couldn't believe me because I thought, well, certainly someone would have told me if there were living pterosaurs. Well, no, because like me, nobody wants to be the crazy guy who saw the living dinosaur. That's it. Just like a lot of people don't want to be the crazy person who saw the goat man or the crazy person who saw the Bigfoot. As soon as I came out and I said, look, this is what I'm doing, this is where I am, and I decided to be that person, people I'd known for 20 years said, okay, I got to tell you a story. And I'm like, what? I have known you for 20 years. How have you never told me the story? One of my best friends had an encounter after, like, unfortunately, it happened after I wrote the book. So I was like, dang it, I really could have used that in my book. But it took him weeks to tell me what happened, like a week before I finished writing my book, because he had an encounter. I think probably is the same or a similar creature, not too far from where I had my encounter. But he's like, he doesn't believe he saw it, but he's like, I don't know what it was. He's like, all I know is I saw this thing at this place, and this is what it looked like. But he's like, I don't buy that it was. He's like, I can't believe it was a pterosaur because I can't believe that they're still alive. Right? It's I mean, so many people came out and said, yeah, I've had these encounters and I don't know what to do with them because we don't talk about them, right? Because we don't have, because our modern vocabulary says, nope, these things are extinct. They've been extinct for 65 million years. We have no real evidence that it was actually 65 million years, but we're going to say it was, right? We're going to say it against actual evidence that it's that it didn't happen 65 million years ago. But that's the whole point. You now have that public pressure saying, hey, don't talk about this because you're going to be the crazy person, right? Again, like I said, a couple hundred years ago, we had protocols for when you saw the other folk. You knew not to mess with them. Now we go looking for them. So yeah, that's why I'm here. That's how I got here. I saw something I shouldn't have.
But yeah, that was a good question at the end. Who's looking for them? So there must be a population if they're there. How can they hide I
That's a great question. Like I said, 30 seconds away from any given day saying it's all supernatural, right?
yeah.
Um, but I'll say it this way. The thing I figured out about these is everyone who saw them, every single one here in North Texas and Southern Oklahoma, everyone that I've talked to that has seen them in this area, and that goes out towards Crosbyton and deep West Texas, right? They all said, when they got a good look at them, they all said the same thing. I thought it was a heron. I thought it was a crane. I thought pelican. I got one who said I thought it was an owl. That's because it happened at night and it was big. Again, everyone assumes it's a different thing because it looks like it's because the way it flies. Let me see if I can pull up an image, an image I drew real quick. If I can find it quickly enough.
Oh, so you drew a picture of it.
Oh yeah,
Oh,
yeah. I
interesting.
illustrated the book. Yeah. Where is it hiding? It's terrible. I never remember where things are in my own book. Here we are. I don't know if this will show up well on the camera.
Oh, yeah, we can see it.
Okay. So you see how it kind of, let me raise it up there. Okay. Um, so they do an S curve, when a heron or a crane flies, sometimes they'll like sit the back of their head on their shoulders,
Hmm.
right? To make sure they do an S curve thing like that. They, as near as I can tell, this is very common for them when they're flying. I think the ones here in North Texas just aren't big enough to really stand out to most people, right? And they when they fly, they look like they look like a something that they've seen their entire lives, right? They just look like the overall outline is like a crane. Like I said, that's what I thought I was looking at. Their legs stick out behind them. And if you're so busy on these things, right, on the phone,
Yeah.
you're busy driving to work, you're not going to take a second look. Everyone said, I thought it was a pelican. I thought it was a crane. But then I got a closer look at it. And most of these sightings are within 30, 40 feet. They're very close. So I think what we have is a population of very, very, again, it's a very small population. This is not a large population of creatures. Um, they're reptilians, which means they're not going to be active all the time, right? Like a bird is. Because birds expend a lot of energy. They have to, because they're warm blooded, they have to be places, they've got to eat all the time. Yes, flight does require a lot of calories, but reptiles don't need the same amount of caloric intake as a warm blooded animal or a mammal does. So they're probably not as active. And again, reptiles don't typically uh, just live in one place, right? They have a range, like a sea turtle. Sea turtles don't have nests where they just hang out all the time. They're just constantly moving. And I think that's what these things are doing. They're like sea turtles. They move over great distances. They're not as active as like a bird, and it's a very small population. And they do seem to they may even be almost nocturnal in a lot of senses, or they're only active during particular parts of the day. So it's just one of those things where there just isn't a whole lot of them to stand out, and people aren't looking for them. You can have, it's cliche now, but you have that exercise people like to show the video where you're told to count, how many times the basketball is passed to a person in white. And while this video is going on, a dude in a gorilla suit walks through the group, and no one ever sees the gorilla, right? Because you're watching for one thing. Most people aren't looking for these things. I have lived in North Texas essentially my entire life, except for a few years when I was in East Texas. I've never seen a painted bunting. They're very common birds.
Yeah.
I have seen birds that aren't supposed to be here, but I've never seen a painted bunting. Gray foxes live here. I've only seen one, and that only happened a few years ago. I've never seen a coral snake, and they're indigenous to this area. There's the simple fact of the matter is there are things that are common that we just don't run across. There are people who will swear I hear all the time. It's like, oh, I've hunted these woods all the time, and there's no such thing as weasels or minks or whatever. No, but they are indigenous. You're telling me you've been out in the woods, you've hunted for decades, and you've never run across one? It doesn't mean they're not there. It just means you weren't looking for them,
Yeah.
right? And these things have survived by essentially staying away from us. I don't think, again, the naturally existing creatures, I think, just don't care, right? They're trying to, in fact, in many ways, they're trying to avoid contact with us. They're just doing what they do. But if it's a very small population, they look enough like cranes when they're flying around. Most people aren't paying attention. And then when people do see them, they shut up about it because they don't want to be the crazy person.
Yeah. I can relate. I can relate a little bit. So there was more sightings in Texas. That's interesting. So can you maybe an estimate guess how many sightings in what time span Has there
Oh,
been
geez.
like a lot or?
So, um, me personally, the people I have spoken with, I have like about a dozen over a 20-year period. Like from including my sighting, right? Now most of the sightings I've actually talked to about people, that was in like a 10 or 15-year time span. Most of them were actually relatively close together. Um, but if we include mine, I'd say over like a 20-year or so time span. Uh, although I just realized it's now 2024, so we're getting over a 20-year time span. I've got like about a dozen sightings. Um, and now
You.
a couple of those are I'm not including are older and they're further out west. But I've got several out west. If we include sightings that I can't confirm are pterosaurs, meaning I can't tell you how, I honestly have no idea how many sightings I've got where people can't really identify it because it's at night, but it's just really, really big. And they're like, I don't know what this thing was, but it was a big bird. That's really what they call it, right? But they're like, I don't know that it was even a bird. It just had wings. Um, that goes much, much larger. Like that's way higher. And that's again over that same 20-year period. If we include the stuff that Ken has well over 50 sightings, it's probably greater now that he could probably say, you know, ish were that a pterosaur is the best explanation. And again, that's over a 30-40 year period.
Okay.
So they are occurring, right? But this goes back to my point of it's probably that we have a very small population. And again, here's the thing, like the ones down in South Texas seem to be much larger than the ones that are up here. Uh, which is a big question that I have. Are we seeing two different species, or if we are we seeing one species at different stages of development, right? Like if they're smaller, they stay up in North Texas. When they get to a certain size, do they change to a larger migratory pattern, right? Because they seem to glide, so they probably want more valleys. They want more canyons for that. Because like I said, almost all the ones that we have here in North Texas and Southern Oklahoma do seem to have a connection to elevations where they can take flight, right, and just sort of glide. And they seem to be actually kind of low to the ground. Again, all the ones that I really think are legit, they were within 20, 30 feet. They weren't very high up off the ground, and they were around creeks and rivers where again they could probably fly into and just coast off of the compressed air because the way the wind's moving through. Again, those creeks and rivers are cut into the bedrock, so it gives them probably a lot more lift. So they're not flying real high, right? They're not flying real high. Or midday. They're staying hidden. But yeah, I mean, between me and Ken, we probably over the last, we go back 40 years, 70, 80 sightings that could be attributed to these things in Texas and southern Oklahoma and moving out towards Arizona. So I don't know, right? Like and the thing is, those are just the people who are willing to come forward and say they saw it. There's no way to know how many people have actually seen these things. Again, I was surprised by how many people just knew what I was doing. Like, okay, well, I need to tell you something. I didn't ask them. I never asked anyone, did you see a pterosaur? Have you seen a Bigfoot? Have you seen a whatever? I just said, have you seen anything weird? And that's why I was very convinced that these things were a real legitimate breeding population, was because the descriptions were universal. Like with the paranormal stuff, descriptions are all over the place, right? I got people talking about dogmen with goat legs and antlers and um so it's like the descriptions are all over the place, but with the populations I'm willing to think are probably living creatures, there's a very high level of consistency, and the variances, like a lot of them have said, some have said they were gray, like what I saw. Others have said a rusty brown, or like almost a reddish color. Well, yeah, but that matches up with things like sexual dimorphism, right? If the males and females are going to look different, like some don't have crests, some have little crests. Well, that's indicative of sexual dimorphism. A breeding population would have to have male and female.
Right.
So even the inconsistencies are actually consistent with the living, breathing population of animal versus a supernatural event.
I think that's crazy. and 70 to 80 sightings, no matter in what time span,
Hmm.
is crazy though. So yeah.
Oh, it is. It absolutely is.
Hmm.
But it's probably crazier that we don't talk about it.
With that much sightings, it is
Oh
crazy.
yeah.
Other news articles, maybe old news articles, I imagine people back then long ago saw them too.
Yeah. Um, so we tend to forget because again, we don't have a really good historical we just don't, reruns are our history, right? Um, by the time a lot of newspapers get, are active out here, it's already 20s, 30s. A lot of these ideas are already cemented in the popular mind. However, I would suggest that and I've done episodes on this, that the Jersey Devil, the big sighting that everyone had, where we kind of get the drawing of the the standing goat with the long tail and all that. That event, I would suggest, was a pterosaur because the artist wasn't there. He took the people's descriptions he took them literally, but not seriously. And pterosaurs were not popularly known at the time of that sighting. But if you look at the description that was actually given, and you're like, okay, what does a pterosaur look like? What does this look like? It's clear that they saw a pterosaur because again, they weren't describing a 20-foot dragon. They were describing this thing, but they didn't have a lot of language for it. In fact, mostly throughout human history, people are describing things with what they know. That's why we see so many dragons pop up that look really weird because we take the descriptions literally. We know theropods had feathers now, right? Well, if you're living in Persia 3,000 years ago, how do you describe something like an oviraptor, right? It looks like a chicken dragon. And so you get the cockatrix. It's we depict it as it's half chicken, half dragon. Well, that's the best word that they had. They were just trying to describe what they saw. But it took us, it's only been the last 20, 30 years that we've realized that some of these dinosaurs had feathers, right? So if you're living in Persia, you're like, well, it was a dragon that looked like it was part chicken, right? Again, the wyvern, you go back, there was a dragon that was killed in the late 14th century, early 15th century. It was put on display. It's after that event that the heraldic imagery for the wyvern changes to include that little flange on the end of the tail. Before that, there's no flange on any dragon tails in European artwork.
Yeah.
After that event, you get that what we consider the traditional dragon tail now with that little diamond shape. That's when it's at that time that it enters into common usage. Now, about a century later, there is what is clearly a gaff, meaning a created body, taxidermied body that's on display. We know it's a gaff because people took more naturalistic drawings of it, but again, 100 years later, which means the thing had probably decayed. And they're like, well, we know what this thing looked like. Let's build a new one so people can come and see it. That was actually very, very common, right? Uh, for museums to do at the time. Well, if you look at the three different artists over about a 20-year period drew this thing, this gaff. Again, we know it's gaff because we can identify the skull. But if you look at the features, it has a tooth coming out of its nose at the very tip. It has three claws on the tips of the wings, or where the bend of the wings would be, and has a long tail and one set of legs. That is a rhamphorhactoid pterosaur. The word rhamphorhynchus means tooth beak. They had not only just teeth in their muzzle, like a regular reptile or lizard would, it had a tooth coming out of the end of its nose that made it look like a beak. That's And again, they all had long tails with flanges. The flange enters the heraldic imagery at that time. And we have this gaff that was probably modeled after the original, has a tooth at the end of its nose, three claws on its wings. That's a wyvern. That's that they call a wyvern. That's a rhamphorhactoid pterosaur. People were just describing it with what they had. They didn't. The word dinosaur doesn't exist until the late 1800s, right? And it wasn't even really popular. These things weren't even popular until the 1900s or late, early 1900s, late 1800s. So we have seen them in the past, but by the time we get to newspapers out here that are able to do things more regularly, yeah, that sort of propaganda of you don't talk about this is already there. Now that being said, there are articles, right, of people seeing weird things. Those do exist. There's one photograph. It's only one photograph that I think has a good chance of being real, of a child holding what appears to be a ramfractoid pterosaur, supposedly taken in Texas in the 50s, and it appears in a newspaper. The problem is no one can find the original newspaper.
Mhm.
And the issue is, if it happened in the 50s, if it was like a small town newspaper and only a few issues, a few pieces survived. Newsprint's very cheap, high ammonia content. A lot of them have gone away. But if it was a small town paper, right, if there was a fire, then they're all gone. So we may only have the copies that were made of that original newspaper. So, yeah, are there stories? There are, but not a lot, for a number of reasons. But the thing is, you do look, yeah, there's reason to think they've been seen for a very long time.
I think we should wrap it up for today. There was a lot.
Sounds like a plan. Yep.
I could keep on talking for hours, man. Especially about the pterosaurs, because it's very interesting. And I would love to see that picture with the child holding up the pterosaur. I would.
I'll see if I can find it. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, maybe I can put a link in the description then. Yeah, I've seen a lot of AI pictures of people holding pterosaurs and so.
Yeah.
Man, it's crazy times with the AI. You can't trust no picture anymore. It's crazy. This is why I love
Mm-hmm.
the old UFO pictures and the old
Mm-hmm.
cryptid pictures so
Yeah.
much that was made with analog cameras, because
Mm-hmm.
today, and I think you said it in another podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Um, if people take pictures with their cell phones, and those cell phones on modern cameras, they are
Mm-hmm.
programmed to see face, so they have pareidolia,
Pareidolia.
pareidolia already, yeah,
Yeah. It's already baked into the algorithm on these
included.
things half
Yeah,
the time.
so
Yeah.
it's looking for faces, it's looking for uh,
Mm-hmm.
stuff like that, and this is why you can't trust a picture anymore, especially if you use the zoom, and no,
Mm-hmm.
I don't I don't
Yeah. It's
want to.
unfortunately, these are not really cameras, right? Like that's like, it's good for a few things, but it's not really good for what we want it to be. If you want to get out there and do research, you'll need to get a real camera. It can still be a digital camera, but it needs to be a real one. Like, it has a real lens on it. It's an actual camera. But yeah, so I always recommend people do that. So if you want to go out there, you're going to have to drop some cash. Unfortunately, it isn't a cheap thing that we're doing out here.
Yeah,
So do bear that in mind, sadly.
yeah, bear that in mind. Before I let you slip, I will let people tell people about your YouTube channel. It's called SIRU Papers. Is it the way you
Yes.
say it? Yeah.
Yes, Siru. Yeah, SIRU papers, and there's also Jason McLean questions everything. I have retired from making new content at the moment, but I will have some more books and things coming out in the fall. And sirupapers.com, sirupapers.com is my website, but I recently had to move uh, servers and providers, but I will have it back up here shortly. But yeah, for right now, YouTube, sirupapers.com, or go to sirupapers or Jason McLean questions everything.
Okay. And there's the homepage, Jar of Paint. It's also.
Yeah, we're going to be redoing a lot of that right now.
Mhm.
So we're unfortunately just a lot of things to do. We had some problems with our old server and old providers, so we're
Yeah.
working on that one.
Okay. But well, I will put links in the description, as I said. Okay. Then thank you so much, Jason. That was awesome, and it went in a completely different direction. It's never goes as planned. That's what I learned in 5 years of podcast and 800 episodes in German and English. But
Good for you.
this is why I love what I do. I really love it, and man, we're 3.5 hours in. That's awesome. And
Yeah, you're hitting Joe Rogan numbers there.
yeah, yeah, he always has long episodes, but that's
Mm-hmm.
interesting. You can talk about so much stuff, and we could keep on talking for 3 hours more, and we would still have a lot of things to talk about. But then I would die. So
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, my Texas is trying to kill me right now with all the pollen, so I need to go get some more water.
yeah.
So yeah, it's a good time to call it.
I'm also in baby mode right now. I'm hungry. I'm tired, and my back hurts, and I need to piss. So
Yeah, there you
you
go.
very, very much. And stay with me for 2 more minutes, okay?
Yeah, no problem.